Chapter 185. The old priest's eyes brightened. He glanced at the sea sovereign and smiled. "Thank you for your majesty's magnanimity. In order to express our apologies, Moon-Praying Shrine is willing to offer up a rising sea mountain. I ask that your majesty show mercy and forgive priest Qin Yu's sins." The hall was filled with cries of alarm. In the legends, the rising sea mountain was a treasure born from the heavens and earth. It could float in the deep sea, and after being refined, it could float and move according to one's will. In addition to its astonishing defensive strength, it was a treasure that every combat division yearned for even in their dreams. It could be said that if one obtained a rising sea mountain, the threat of a combat division would nearly double. It was the perfect platform for transporting troops. And in the sea region, a combat division was the most formidable strength. In front of a combat division, any powerhouse was nothing but a joke. Currently, it was known that there were a total of 7 rising sea mountains in the sea region. Moon-Praying Shrine occupied 3, and the capital city controlled the vast majority of the sea region. Even so, they only had 2. "Your Majesty." A general of the army stepped forwards, his expression excited. The whale sovereign sighed inwardly. He looked at the old man not too far away, a bit of admiration in his eyes. This old man was truly cunning and astute. In order to achieve his goal, he was willing to pay such a heavy price. He swept his eyes around. Indeed, even those that stood on his side began to hesitate. On one hand, if they killed Qin Yu and waged war with Moon-Praying Shrine, then everyone would fall into the raging flames of war. On the other hand, if they turned a blind eye or found a substitute to kill, then they could obtain a rising sea mountain. Disregarding others, even the boorish men in the army were already red with envy towards the rising sea mountain. Now that it was within their grasp, if someone ruined this matter, then while they might not say anything, they would inevitably hold a grudge in their hearts. If they offended these high-level figures of the army, it wouldn't be a problem for a while. But as time passed, there would definitely be trouble. The sea sovereign promptly said, "Priest, please wait a moment. This solitude will soon give you a reply." The priest stood up. "Thank you, your majesty." He bowed once more and left. The sea sovereign lightly said, "Everyone, in this situation, tell this solitude what to do." An hour later, Qin Yu walked out of the palace. As he saw the old man standing outside, dressed in strange robes and with an extraordinary aura, his heart stirred. He cupped his hands together and said, "Thank you, Lord Priest." The priest smiled. He thought that Qin Yu was indeed a smart person. There wasn't the slightest bit of pain on his face, as if he had just given away a skyscraping sea mountain. Instead, his own son had been killed in front of him. On the day of ancestral worship, he had slaughtered everyone, and those he killed were all important characters. Even so, he was still fine. TSK, just thinking about it made him feel fierce. Qin Yu, who was thought to be fierce, quietly followed behind. The joy in his heart gradually calmed down. Then, there was a trace of fear as well as a bit of hope. Ever since his identity was exposed, he had been walking on the edge of a blade. The slightest mistake and he would have died without a grave. And the reason he was able to accomplish this was not because of his strength or intelligence, but because of the little blue lamp. If it weren't for the little blue lamp's strength, would the sea sovereign have allowed him to live? Would Moon-Praying Shrine have helped him? He feared he would have already become a corpse. His own strength was still far too weak. If he had the strength to contend with the whale sovereign, the old turtle, or even that mysterious majesty, then what did it matter if his identity was exposed? In the end, only a powerful cultivation was the foundation of everything. Thinking of this, Qin Yu faintly smiled. Although there had been many twists and turns and there had been many troubles, he was still alive. Moreover, the 5-element golden cores in his Dantian sea had gathered together. Without any shackles, he could officially start cultivating. Thinking about it, it wouldn't be long before his strength would experience another great leap. He just didn't know what boundary he would reach. It was truly something to look forward to. This time, they didn't go underground through Supman's residence. Rather, in a heavily guarded hall, 8 black-clothed seafolk were sitting cross-legged. When Qin Yu and the guard arrived, one of them opened his eyes. His eyes were gray and icy cold, without any fluctuations. The guard took out a token. The black-clothed seafolk glanced at it and then closed his eyes, no longer bothering with them. If one looked carefully at these 8 people, they would discover that their appearances were somewhat similar and their auras faintly blended together. Their figures were half hidden in the darkness, like 8 wooden stakes. They didn't have any fluctuations of aura, but with Qin Yu's powerful soul, he could feel an inconceivably rich smell of blood coming from their bodies. It was hard to imagine just what sort of person they were, just what sort of past they had, in order to obtain such a horrifying smell of blood. But there was one point that Qin Yu was well aware of. If someone tried to rush underground, they would inevitably be torn to pieces by a terrifying strength. I can only escort you here. There will be others responsible for the rest. As the guard finished speaking, he used the power of the token in his hand to activate the underground transmission array. Qin Yu didn't hesitate. He stepped in. But with the formidable effects from before, it would be impossible for them not to be curious as to what Qin Yu had said. Thus, Qin Yu had asked the vine to seal away his aura. The little blue lamp was his greatest secret and what he relied on. If it were to be exposed, he would truly be beyond redemption. Wait a moment. I need to make some preparations to activate the treasure. Only then can I help you. As Qin Yu spoke, he sat down cross-legged, the contents of the treasure slowly appearing in his mind. To help the little blue lamp, he only needed to wait until nightfall. As for preparing anything, that was just an excuse. Staying in the royal palace for a few days was also good. He could take advantage of this chance to refine it under the protection of the vine and increase his ability to protect himself. In the grand hall, the sea sovereign opened his eyes, a helpless smile on his face. The companion vine has sealed away the aura. This solitude can't see what is happening. The old turtle humphed. Although he had guessed that with this little bastard's cautiousness, he would definitely make a response, he still couldn't help but curse out several times. Then, should we think of another way? Chapter 186. Underground, within the enclosed space formed by interweaving vines, a halo of 5-colored light illuminated the surroundings. Beneath the illumination of the dense vines, it seemed quite strange. Qin Yu sat down cross-legged. The source of the 5-colored light floated around him. These were 5 fist-sized spheres of light that seemed to slowly wander about in a disorderly manner. Suddenly, he opened his eyes. He lifted his hand and pointed his 5 fingers upwards. 5 spheres of light flew towards him, each falling onto his fingertip. Starting from his thumb, they were white, black, blue, red, and yellow in order. Then, they shrank until they were the size of a knuckle. With a thought, the spheres of light gradually stretched out until they took the shape of a sword. Hum, hum, at this moment, the cry of a sword reverberated through the ground. The vines fiercely trembled, making loud crashing sounds. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a smile that rapidly expanded to cover his entire face. Carefree laughter rang out from underground, constantly echoing as it struck the walls of vines. He had succeeded. From the first time he saw it in Immortal Eclipse Valley, to obtaining the sword diagram, to obtaining it, and then to seizing the 5-element spiritual object in the sea region, all of this could only be described as arduous. After several twists and turns, after several life and death situations, he had finally borne fruit today. Afterwards, he grasped the 5 element swords. While he might not be able to freely roam the world, he would at least have the strength to protect himself in this world. The 9 levels of the Golden Core realm were divided into 5 different cores. In normal circumstances, the 5-element Golden Cores would fall by 3 or 4 levels. But when Chi-Nuke split his Golden Core, the ruckus he caused had been far too great, far greater than he had imagined. The vortex of spiritual strength, the power of the Sea Mausoleum, as well as the mysterious altar phantom summoned by the 100 Nether Sword. When all of these things superimposed upon each other, his divided cores were no longer normal. Thus, his 5 5-element Golden Cores remained at the 7th level. This wasn't something as simple as 5 7th-level Golden Cores added together. Because the 5 elements mutually reinforced and restrained each other, Chi-Nuke could instantly transform the magic power of his 5-element Golden Cores into a single attribute. The resulting expansion would be far greater than the addition of pure strength. He could even contend with an early nascent soul. Now, with the 5-element swords in his hands, although Chi-Nuke's cultivation hadn't increased, his combat strength had risen yet again. Although he hadn't tested it yet, he should be able to contend with a middle nascent soul. And, it couldn't be forgotten that this was in a situation where Chi-Nuke's mortal body wasn't superimposed upon it. After devouring the sarcomas, as well as the constant damage and repair process during the core splitting process, the degree of strength was incomparable to the past. After a long time, the laughter died down. Chi-Nuke clenched his fist and the 5-element sword scattered. Perhaps now it seemed that cultivating it was useless. It couldn't change the predicament he was facing at all. But that was because the ones he faced today were peerless powerhouses like the Sea Sovereign, Whale Sovereign, and Turtle Origin. In this world, they were the most formidable existences. Putting aside this small group of people, his current strength was enough to run amok in the world. He paused for a moment. When his mind calmed down, he looked up and smiled. "Don't worry, I won't do anything to you." The rattan leaves rubbed against each other, producing a sound. Very scary, Chi-Nuke's eyebrows arched up. "Your voice seems much clearer than before. It seems you've made considerable progress during this time." He had been underground for nearly half a month, so it was about time he left. The vines swayed happily. "Yes. I feel much more clear-headed, thank you." Chi-Nuke waved his hand. "There's no need to thank me. I've received your reward, and before coming here, I myself had already obtained some benefits." The vine continued to sway. "That is not my gift, you had best not use it too often. In the future, something bad will happen." Chi-Nuke thought to himself, "I don't even know what you gave me. Even if I wanted to use it, I wouldn't have enough time." Suddenly, he subconsciously thought back to the hallucination he had experienced after the black crystal piece fused into his body. Just as he was about to ask what was going on, the vine in front of him twisted in pain. His thoughts were immediately interrupted. He asked, "What is it?" "I am going to evolve." Chi-Nuke lifted a hand and put away the little blue lamp. The vine was in so much pain that it could no longer maintain the existence of the sealed space. Countless vines scattered and smashed into the ground, sending rocks flying everywhere. With the refinement complete, the vine had also begun to evolve. It should be able to satisfy the royal palace's requirements. Chi-Nuke's eyes flashed. He cupped his hands together and said, "Brother Vine, it can be considered fate that we met. After I leave today, I fear that we will never meet again, so I will bid my farewells." He turned and left. His figure flickered several times before vanishing into the darkness. In the distance, the vine's anxious voice echoed out, "Your name?" Chi-Nuke paused, not turning his head. "My name is Chi-Nuke." A moment later, Chinyu emerged from the raging tides of strength. He stood in front of the stone door, his expression calm. With his current strength, he wouldn't be in such a distressed state like he was in the past if he relied on himself. The stone door opened. The old sea race man who had sent him in stood outside. It was unknown whether he had arrived in time or whether he had been staying here all this time. His expression was still indifferent, but his eyes were much more relaxed. It was clear he already knew some news. He lightly said, "Follow me." He stepped into the transmission array. Light flashed and Chinyu appeared in a corner of a grand hall. The priest was sitting there drinking tea. He looked up and a brilliant light flashed in his eyes. He smiled and said, "Little friend Chinyu, you're finally willing to come out." There was a hint of relief in his voice. Chinyu walked out of the transmission array. He cupped his hands together and said, "Priest, I've made you wait for so long. I apologize. It's fine. As long as you came, it's fine." The priest laid down his teacup and cupped his hands together towards the old turtle. "Thank you, Brother Turtle, for your tea. It was truly excellent. If you have a chance to come to my moon-praying shrine in the future, I will definitely entertain you." The old turtle stood up and lightly humphed. "Don't speak such sarcastic words. If I really do go to moon-praying shrine in the future, I will either be captured by you or destroyed. No matter what happens, many people will die, so it's best if we don't meet." The priest smiled. Although Brother Turtle's words are a bit direct, the general meaning is correct. "But, my moon-praying shrine has always been obedient to the capital city and has never had any thoughts of rebelling. I hope that this peace can last for a long time." He cupped his hands together and turned to leave. "Little friend Chinyu, let's go." Chinyu bowed towards the old turtle. "I must thank Senior Turtle for looking after me all this time. Chinyu thanks you here." The old turtle waved his hands again and again. "Hurry and leave. I don't want to see the priest and I don't want to see you again. You are nothing but a troublemaker." These words weren't easy to refute. Troublemaker Chinyu rubbed his nose, an awkward expression on his face. Moon-praying shrine's extremely eye-catching carriage was currently parked outside the palace. The one driving it was Shuezhang. Chinyu glanced at him and nodded, not saying anything. On the day he had blocked the whale sovereign, although it was because moon-praying shrine needed his help, he still felt a bit grateful. The priest walked in front and Chinyu followed behind. After boarding the carriage, Shuezhang shouted out loud and the carriage began to slowly move forward. At the entrance of the hall, the old turtle withdrew his gaze. After taking several steps, he suddenly stopped and frowned. Something's wrong. This brat Chinyu, how come he doesn't seem tired at all? Rather, he seems to have become fiercer. In the carriage, the priest's eyes flashed. He said something similar, "Congratulations, little friend Chinyu, for making such great progress in your cultivation." Chinyu cupped his hands together. "I must thank Lord Priest. If it weren't for you, I would already be dead. How could I have improved my cultivation?" I already said that moon-praying shrine needed little friend's help, so there's no need to thank me." The priest laughed happily, a bit of appreciation in his eyes. Of course, the reason Chinyu directly admitted it was because in front of these old fellows with transcendent cultivations, it was far too difficult to disguise himself. Rather than leaving behind a false impression, he simply agreed. "Priest, I have been in the royal palace for too long. I fear that your department has been waiting anxiously for me. I'm not tired right now and can go back to work at any time." Why had moon-praying shrine saved him? Chinyu had never forgotten this point. Now that he had regained some of his freedom, he certainly knew how to return the favor. Why did he need to wait for them to bring it up? The priest laughed. "Little friend Chinyu is truly a wonderful person. Then, I won't be polite. He turned his hand and a jade box appeared in his palm. It was light blue in color and seemed ordinary. But with just a glance, Chin-yu could tell that it wasn't ordinary at all. The essence energy was restrained and the light of the treasure didn't reveal itself. There was no trace of it being refined, as if it had been formed directly by the heavens and earth. This wasn't ordinary at all, it was simply an incomparably precious treasure. If this treasure was used to hold something, it could be imagined just how precious the thing inside was. Chin-yu cautiously received it with both hands. After opening it, he discovered that there was a completely different world within. The space within the jade box was much larger than it seemed from the outside. Space treasure. There was no power in the world that couldn't be grasped and controlled. For instance, metal, wood, fire, earth, the 5 elements that could be seen everywhere, and there were also the profound and unfathomable powers of space and time. Chin-yu didn't know what sort of cultivation was needed to grasp the power of space, but he could tell that it was an extremely profound boundary. This jade box was an unrivaled treasure. The space within was 100 feet wide. There was dirt, water, and even the inner walls of the jade box still emitting light from the shadows of the sun and moon. This was simply an independent and extremely small world. This was naturally the way it was when the heavens and earth were formed. If it weren't like this, how could it be called an unrivaled treasure? But at this time, all of this was something he casually swept his eyes over. Then, all of Chin-yu's attention was drawn to a very beautiful flower growing in the dirt. That's right, Chin-yu couldn't think of any words to describe it. He could only say that it was beautiful, because it was extremely, extremely beautiful. Anyone would fall in love with it at first glance. This was love, not liking. The difference between the two was far too great and needed to be clearly distinguished. It was about 30 feet tall, and every curve of its waist exuded an air of elegance. Its leaves were as green as jade, so green that it looked like a pool of flowing water. Between every few leaves, there was a flower blooming. Red, orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, purple, and even more colors could be found on these flowers. They were so delicate that they seemed to be made of the most gentle water, causing people to subconsciously hold their breaths, afraid that a slight breath would hurt them. Boundless vitality exuded from every inch of this beautiful flower. Smelling it wasn't the fragrance of a flower, but the pure aura of life that shook one's spirit. Anyone would think that it was perfect, unparalleled in the world, and that its vitality was incomparably potent. But Chin-yu could faintly feel that this aura of life was a bit too rich and overflowing. Just like the underground vine, it needed to become stronger in order to withstand more violent energy. The saint flower needed to become stronger and absorb more energy. The more energy it absorbed, the faster it could release. As long as the absorption and release reached a balance, it would naturally be safe. The carriage returned to the Great Glory Gambling Hall. Chin-yu was respectfully escorted into a heavily guarded chamber. Moon Praying Shrine's high priest and vice priest personally stood guard, and the entire Wolf Riders blocked off the inside and outside. The various powers of the capital had obviously come to a tacit understanding. They all restrained the forces under their command and didn't approach this area at all, so as to avoid any misunderstandings. And after Chin-yu obtained a brief period of freedom, he was placed under house arrest for a long period of time. Even if Moon Praying Shrine was only doing this for the safety of the Saint Flower, it wasn't any different. Just like that, one day after another passed. Chin-yu felt that he had been a bit too confident in the little blue lamp. There were always some places where accidents could occur. For instance, the soul mushroom from before, and now Moon Praying Shrine Saint Flower. Did the little blue lamp have any effect on it? Of course it did. Moreover, he could clearly feel that the Saint Flower's condition was improving, although the speed was a bit slower. Qin Yu carefully communicated with a white-dressed woman from Moon Praying Shrine. Afterwards, he learned that she was the high priest's daughter. He discovered that according to the current speed, if he wanted to help the Saint Flower restore its balance, it would take at least several years or even longer. Of course, the premise of this was that the Saint Flower could last until then. Otherwise, with a loud bang, Qin Yu feared that he would die a miserable death. However, this result left Moon Praying Shrine excited. This was because this was the first time they had found a way to save the Saint Flower. Not long after, the High Priest personally spoke with Qin Yu. He expressed that he didn't need to worry and that Moon Praying Shrine had enough patience. Moreover, after the Saint Flower's condition was stabilized, they also had some methods to extend its survival as much as possible. In short, as long as you continue to treat the Saint Flower like this, we can wait. Qin Yu was originally a bit anxious, but after determining that there was nothing he could do to change the situation, he could only force himself to be patient. He comforted himself that no matter where he cultivated, at least with the protection of Moon Praying Shrine, there wouldn't be any problems in terms of safety. Thus, time quietly slipped away like this. During this period of time, Qin Yu had already been executed. It was unknown what the royal palace had done, but it was clear that this was enough to give the lower and middle-level sea folk an explanation. Those that had the qualifications to know the truth kept their mouths shut. After all, this wasn't anything glorious, and there was also the invisible suppression of His Majesty in the royal palace. Ning Qin, Honorable Ning, or perhaps Qin Yu, this name that had stirred up a great storm in the sea race capital city had vanished in the shortest period of time. Any intelligent race was easily forgetful. Perhaps some people would remember this name forever, but most would let it vanish into the depths of their long memories. At most, some years later, when they thought of it, they would say, "Oh, you're talking about that person. I also know him. He's a very fierce human." That was all. When Qin Yu gave Leon the residence, there were some people that had designs on it. After they were drenched in blood, that dilapidated residence was restored to tranquility. No, perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as tranquil. Ever since news spread out from the royal palace that Qin Yu had killed Jing Guanjin and the others on the day of ancestral worship, the Qin family allowed him to take Qingqing's corpse away to be buried. Now, it was in this residence, accompanying Leon day and night. He was also forgotten. If there wasn't an accident, then perhaps he would be like Qin Yu, forever vanishing from the sight of the people of the capital city. The capital city returned to tranquility. Just like it had been for countless years, there were no longer any great waves. As Qin Yu gradually adapted to this tranquility, an accident occurred. In a way, this was a good thing. Because on a certain night, as the Saint Flower was bathed in the light of the little blue lamp, it quietly underwent some important change. Thus, that strong and startling aura of life gradually calmed down. The Saint Flower stopped burning and its strength returned to balance. Moon Praying Shrine fell into a state of wild celebration. The entire Great Glory Gambling Hall was bathed in a festive celebration. And after the priest's daughter repeatedly confirmed that the Saint Flower had truly recovered, this joy reached its peak. The fragrance of wine and meat spread out for more than 10 miles. Even the usually calm vice priest unknowingly drank too much. He grabbed onto Qin Yu's hand, laughing and crying. He patted his chest and promised again and again that Moon Praying Shrine would be his friend from now on and that he would receive the best reception whenever he came. Qin Yu dealt with this for a while. After the vice priest left, he was replaced by someone else. In short, his ears were ringing. It wasn't until deep into the night that most people fell asleep that he finally found some peace. He bitterly smiled and shook his head. Then, he saw the wolf riders that were still standing guard. Although they were all excited, they maintained their composure. After eating some food, they returned to their posts. Perhaps it was because of the wolf rider's loyalty that the vice priest and the others were so unrestrained in their celebration. The one leading these wolf riders was Shuizhang. He thought for a moment and then brought over a jar of wine. He poured 2 bowls and said, "I can't drink too much because of my duty. Here, I toast you." Qin Yu picked up the wine and drank it in one gulp. He smiled and said, "In truth, I've always wanted to say thank you." Shuizhang nodded and turned to leave. How cold and cruel. Qin Yu didn't care. He returned to his room. He didn't rest on his bed nor did he cultivate. He just quietly sat there. This was because he felt that someone would soon come to see him. And as he thought, the old priest arrived an hour later. He opened the door and saw Qin Yu's calm expression. The old man smiled, but his tone was a bit helpless. "If possible, I really don't want to let you go." Qin Yu reached out a hand and invited him to sit down. "I believe that Lord Priest is someone who keeps his promises." A bright light flashed in the old priest's eyes. "For someone as old as me, promises and things like face aren't important to me. Perhaps I really might go back on my word." Qin Yu lightly said, "Then Lord Priest will discover that the result will not be what you expect. For instance, the saint flower will die." The room fell silent. The old priest frowned, as if he were unhappy that Qin Yu was using the saint flower to threaten him. The latter's expression was light, as if those fierce and forceful words just now hadn't come from him. But it was because of this that no one dared to look down on him. After a long time, the old priest faintly smiled. "Of course it's just for fun. As the priest of Moon Praying Shrine, I am a great figure, so I naturally keep my word." Qin Yu smiled in response. This junior also believes so. However, the old priest's following words were cold and indifferent, even though his tone was still warm. "Moon Praying Shrine saved little friend Qin Yu's life. You shouldn't object to this. In return, little friend saved my saint flower. In that case, you and I are even. Moon Praying Shrine can allow little friend to leave, but when little friend leaves the capital city, I will announce that you have lost your status as Moon Praying Shrine's guest priest." He paused for a moment and then continued to say, "After all, for someone who will soon leave, I will not allow Moon Praying Shrine to establish a powerful enemy." The old priest didn't say who the enemy was, but it wasn't difficult to guess his identity, the Whale Sovereign. This was a terrifying existence that had disappeared ever since that day in the Sea Race's royal court. It was clear that he wouldn't easily give up on a goal that he had failed to accomplish several times. If Qin Yu stepped out of the capital city and lost the protection of Moon Praying Shrine, he would definitely attack. This was the silent choice that the old man had laid out. Join Moon Praying Shrine or face the slaughter of the Whale Sovereign. Chapter 188. Although this was cold, realistic, and even a bit too unreasonable, the priest's actions weren't wrong. From Moon Praying Shrine's point of view, it could even be called reasonable. Thus, after a brief moment of surprise, Qin Yu could only sigh at how thick these old fellows' skin was. He nodded and said, "I understand." This reply was very light, as if he were telling you what to eat for lunch today and then nodding in response. It wasn't a choice that involved life or death. Although this sort of attitude didn't directly answer, it was already a clear answer. The priest sighed, a trace of helplessness in his eyes. "We will stay in the capital city for another 3 days. I hope that little friend Qin Yu can think things through. Moon Praying Shrine's doors are always open to you, as long as you are willing." Qin Yu stood up and sent him away. Then, he closed the door and returned to his chair, a helpless smile on his face. How could he not have thought of the Whale Sovereign's threat? But, while the underground vines of the royal palace and Moon Praying Shrine Saint Flower had saved his life, they had also pushed him to the edge of danger. No one knew of the little blue lamp's existence yet, but it was bound to arouse suspicion. If Qin Yu agreed to Moon Praying Shrine's invitation, he might be able to safely leave the capital city. But no one knew just how things would develop afterwards. Once the little blue lamp's existence was exposed, all that awaited him was death. So, after a brief struggle in his heart, he still refused. Without Moon Praying Shrine's protection, he might be able to rely on his own strength to escape. This was the reason why Qin Yu had the confidence to refuse. If he was in a situation of certain death, then Qin Yu might not mind temporarily joining Moon Praying Shrine in order to find a way to survive. The next day, a guest arrived at the Great Glory Gambling Hall. Even the cold and fierce wolf riders lowered their heads in respect. In the end, she had also played a part in saving the Saint Flower. Sang Ye stepped down from the carriage. As she saw the priest standing not too far away, she stuck out her tongue and quickly stepped forwards to bow. Ye greets Grandpa Priest. The priest smiled and waved his hand. In terms of age, it is normal for you to call me Grandpa. But, if you consider your parents behind you and His Majesty in the palace, then that isn't so easy to say. So, you should just call me Uncle. The young girl's face turned red. How could she withstand the thick skin of these old things? She mumbled a few words, not knowing what to say. The woman faintly smiled. Her ordinary face exuded the demeanor of a noble. Lord Priest speaks too seriously. The various sea races have different lifespans, and it is a tradition for us to refer to each other as our own. How the young miss calls you has no influence on my master or madam. As for His Majesty, she didn't mention him. The people from Sega City, especially the old man beside the madam, didn't have any favorable impressions of the ruler of the sea races in the royal palace. The priest nodded. That makes sense. The two of them exchanged a few words in a warm tone. The priest asked about the couple in Sega City, and the woman responded appropriately. You came to see little friend Qin Yu, right? How about you help me persuade him to join my Moon Praying Shrine? After all, you know the current situation. The woman faintly smiled. I fear we will have to disappoint Lord Priest. The reason we came here today is because we hope that Qin Yu can join Sega City. After all, in the sea region, there shouldn't be anyone that has the friendliest attitude towards humans besides our Sega City. Moreover, there is a bit of friendship between us and Qin Yu. Perhaps he will agree. The priest's eyes flashed. Is that so? Then I wish you success in advance. Thank you, Lord Priest. Without a trace, the two sides completed a round of confrontation. The white-dressed woman watched as the woman and young girl walked towards Qin Yu's residence. She revealed an anxious look in her eyes. Father, why did you agree? What if they really managed to convince Qin Yu? The priest helplessly smiled. He patted his daughter's hand. This matter isn't easy to manage. After all, the choice is in Qin Yu's hands, and we are currently being threatened by him. The woman's complexion changed. Father, are you really worried that he has done something? Perhaps he has, perhaps he hasn't, but what difference does it make? As long as he can make us feel fear, that is what Qin Yu has already succeeded in. However, unless he wants to face the relentless pursuit of Moon Praying Shrine, once we promise to let him leave, he shouldn't do anything else. The woman nodded. She looked over, a bit unwilling. She really hoped that Qin Yu would stay in Moon Praying Shrine. Perhaps they could learn from the royal palace and give Qin Yu some sort of peace of mind. For instance, marriage. But if that really happened, then the only one with a suitable status in Moon Praying Shrine was her. Thinking of this, the white-dressed woman revealed a shy expression. But in the next moment, her eyes filled with determination. As long as she could guarantee that the Saint Flower would be safe in the future, then no matter what price she had to pay, she was willing. The priest frowned. He said in a low voice, "Don't even think about it. I won't agree." The white-dressed young girl wasn't surprised that her father could see through her thoughts. This was because he was the priest of the tribe and also the person closest to the sea spirit in the world. She had never doubted this. "Father, perhaps this can guarantee the Saint Flower a long period of safety and allow my moon-praying shrine to prosper forever. If possible, your daughter is willing." The priest turned and left. "Impossible. Stop thinking about this and don't tell anyone else." The royal palace's promise wasn't able to move Chinyu at all. Although he believed that his daughter wasn't any worse than a princess, the chances of success weren't high. Taking a step back, even if she did succeed, would she still be able to stay by Chinyu's side after marriage? If this brat were to find a chance to run away, then his daughter's life would be ruined. In Chinyu's room, the priest never imagined that the madam of Sage's city would be even bolder than he was. The madam's complexion darkened. It was clear she wasn't satisfied with this arrangement. But her tone remained calm as she explained the situation as clearly as possible. "Mr. Chinyu, this is my madam's attitude. If you are willing to be together with the miss, then Sage's city will be your strongest support. We guarantee that no one will harm you. Of course, before the miss naturally grows up, you cannot truly be together." Sang Yeye's face flushed red. She nervously looked at her toes. Across from her, Chinyu helplessly smiled. He felt deep admiration towards this madam that he had never seen before. She was even able to agree to such a ridiculous matter. How could he know that Sang Yeye had bitterly begged and even used the excuse of running away from home to force this madam to make this decision? Only with the response of the royal palace and moon-praying shrine had the madam finally made this decision. Princess Lushi, who had once hated and wanted to kill each other, the cute and shy Sang Yeye, as well as the priest's beloved daughter that had yet to emerge from the water's surface. In that instant, Chinyu seemed to have obtained a heaven-defying luck in love affairs. He had become a fragrant cake in the eyes of countless people. Unfortunately, all of this was good to think about, it was destined that he wouldn't be able to enjoy it. He reached out a hand and rubbed Sang Yeye's head. Chinyu smiled and said, "Just what are you thinking about all day? Didn't I already tell you that I already have someone in my heart? I can't hold any more." Then, he earnestly spoke to the madam. He thanked her for the good intentions of Sage's city and also expressed his attitude as tactfully as possible. Although she had been rejected, the madam's complexion improved instead. As she looked at Chinyu, her eyes warmed a bit more. "That really is a pity. All right, could your words be any more fake?" Chinyu smiled. He told Sang Yeye that he would soon leave the capital city. He thanked her for her help and said that they would meet again in the future if fate willed it. But everyone knew that these words weren't sincere at all. One was in the sea region and the other was returning to the human world. Without accident, it would be difficult for them to meet again. The young girl was silent for a moment. Her eyes reddened and her nasal voice became a bit heavier. She whispered, "Seventh auntie, can you leave for a moment? I have some words I want to speak with Big Brother Chinyu alone." The madam hesitated for a moment. She looked at Chinyu and nodded. "All right. I will wait outside for Miss." The door opened and then closed. There were only the two of them left in the room. Looking at the young girl's silent appearance, Chinyu wanted to liven up the atmosphere a bit. He jokingly said, "Look, you've made her so nervous. She must be worried that you will be impulsive and do something you will regret. She looks down on me too much. If..." Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by the little loli who threw herself into his arms. Chinyu stiffened. He could feel the hot and wet sensation on his chest. He sighed inwardly and reached out to hold her. Yeah, listen to me. Don't cry. I'm not crying, it's just that my eyes are blurred. Sometimes, the lowly sophistry was just so cute. Chinyu smiled and patted her shoulder. The big brother Chinyu understands. Yeah didn't cry. Yeah is the strongest. But as he said this, Sang Yaya actually began to cry instead. She couldn't even suppress her sobbing. If others were to see this, they would definitely curse Chinyu for being worse than a beast. Big brother Chinyu, seventh auntie didn't tell me, but the truth is that Yaya knows that the whale sovereign is a big bad bastard. He will definitely think of a way to harm you. You rejected my uncle, you rejected Moon Praying Shrine, and you also didn't agree to be with me. Who will protect you? Big brother Chinyu, Yaya knows that you loved that woman, but she died. Why aren't you willing to be with Yaya? I will work hard to grow up. I will treat big brother Chinyu very, very well. I don't want anything to happen to you, I don't. As she spoke of the most heartbreaking parts, the young girl began to cry. Chinyu was moved. He thought for a moment and said, Yeah, I understand your feelings. But, can you please have some faith in me? Although I definitely can't defeat the whale sovereign, I still have some confidence I can escape. Sang Yaya looked up, her eyes red. Her tears nearly broke down Chinyu's persistence. Really, Chinyu earnestly nodded. Of course it's true. Yeah, just you wait. Sooner or later, I will become even more formidable. Then I will come back and kill the whale sovereign. These words were said with a smile. It sounded like he was trying to comfort the young girl's heart, but only Chinyu knew that what he said was the truth. He had killed Jing Guanjin and killed the playboy beside him. It seemed as if he had completed his revenge, but the person behind the scenes hadn't died yet, so how could his thoughts be clear? Thus, the whale sovereign had to die. It was only a matter of time. In this sort of situation where he had to think about how to escape the other party's pursuit and how to kill the whale sovereign, it really was a funny matter. Chapter 189. After comforting Sang Yaya, he spoke a few more words. He thought that the woman outside might not want to wait any longer, so he smiled and sent her out. Although it was very subtle, the woman's quick glance at Sang Yaya didn't escape Chinyu's eyes. She really didn't feel reassured. Miss, it's time for us to leave. Not discovering anything strange, the woman's heart calmed down a little. She nodded to Chinyu and turned around. Sang Yaya's lips moved as if she wanted to say something. Chinyu patted her shoulder. You have to have confidence in me, okay? Thus, the young girl nodded. But even as she boarded the carriage, she kept looking back. As they drove out of the Great Glory Casino, the woman thought for a moment and earnestly said, Miss, I'm beginning to believe your judgment. This Mr. Chinyu is indeed not bad. Sang Yaya curled her lips. Humph. Seventh auntie, I think you know that it is impossible for big brother Chinyu to agree to accept me, so you dare to say that. The woman wasn't surprised that the young girl had seen through her true thoughts. She already knew that the young girl was smart and never doubted her. She nodded and admitted, that's right. No matter how outstanding he is still a human, so how could he be worthy of Miss? I think that Madam already expected this, so you agreed to let Miss make this trip. Now, it is time for Miss to fulfill your promise. You will return to Sega City and not take a single step outside until you are of age. Sang Yaya bit her lips. I will return, after big brother Chinyu leaves. The woman thought for a moment. She felt that it was impossible to change this young girl's stubborn thoughts, so she tacitly agreed. She only sighed inwardly. Perhaps there was something that the miss didn't understand. It wasn't just the whale sovereign that wanted Chinyu dead, but also the tacit consent of many others. For instance, His Majesty. For instance, moon-praying shrine's priest. This human had such a dazzling performance. If he couldn't be used by the sea races, then he should just die. Perhaps this was the common thought of many people. In the end, the sea races stood on opposite sides of humanity. It was only because of innate restrictions that war hadn't erupted between the two races. But the thought of weakening the other was an instinctual instinct. In other words, no one would help Chinyu. Then, could he rely on his own strength to escape the whale sovereign's pursuit? In truth, the woman didn't think this would happen. Personally witnessing the death of someone she cared about and even had a good impression of was an extremely cruel thing, but perhaps this could help the young miss mature faster. Another day passed. Today was the deadline that moon-praying shrine had given Chinyu. They would leave tomorrow. If he stayed here, there would still be one more day of peace. But he didn't plan to wait any longer. So, he bid his farewells to the priest. When he spoke of his decision to leave, he clearly noticed that the eyes of this old man, who had turned hostile so quickly, were filled with helplessness and sorrow. Then, Chinyu received an unexpected gift. What appeared in the priest's hand was a green flower. It looked like it was carved from a water droplet, and it gave off a green and transparent feeling. It contained an incomparably majestic aura of life. I made an agreement with the holy flower that as long as you choose to leave before the deadline, this gift will be given to you. Otherwise, I will take it back. The strength of the saint flower can only be possessed by the brave. At the very least, it seems that little friend Chinyu is a courageous person. I hope that you can survive. With a flick of his fingers, the blue flower flew towards him. Chinyu reached out and received it. Then, like a drop of water, it melted into his flesh and blood, vanishing from sight. But Chinyu could feel its existence. Within his body, there was a powerful life force that was in a dormant state. The Saint Flower's flower can only be obtained by the most outstanding clansman of the Crescent Moon tribe. It will follow you for the rest of your life. After you are injured, the life force within the flower will automatically surge out to repair your injuries. Moreover, its strength can be restored on its own. A flower was a treasure that could store a massive amount of life force and could be used many times over. It was no wonder that this old fellow had such a pained expression. Chinyu sincerely expressed his thanks and received the flower. The priest stood up. Then, I won't send you off. Farewell. Chinyu turned and left. The wolf riders stood guard outside, as if they already knew what had happened. They clenched their fists in front of their chests and bowed their heads in respect. This respect came from their gratitude for saving the saint flower. Shuizheng stood there, not saying anything. He only quietly watched Chinyu's back as he put on a black robe and left the Great Glory gambling hall. Soon, all of the sound shell stations in the capital city urgently broadcasted a message. A guest priest of the tribe had been stripped of his status and would no longer be related to him. The identity of this person was very vague, but those who had the qualifications to know certain things were very clear about the contents of this message. The first elder with a scar on his face chuckled softly. Actually, this old man is rather impressed by this human race junior. Where does he get his confidence from to leave this place alive? Below, a group of white-haired old thieves coldly sneered. Anyone that ruined the day of ancestral worship and offended their ancestors must die. See Spirit Pavilion. The 9-layer building was being rebuilt. Old C was temporarily living in a courtyard not too far away. As he heard the news, he waved his hand, indicating that he should leave. Clearwood bit her lips. Teacher. This Chinyu is someone that can always accomplish things that others cannot. Although it seems to me that he cannot escape death, that doesn't mean that there won't be a miracle. He has always been someone that is good at creating miracles, isn't he? His voice was light. But light didn't only represent tranquility, but also powerlessness. A purple card sea spirit teacher had a revered status and possessed an incomparably powerful influence. But he had no way of interfering in this matter. In a quiet courtyard near Noble Court Avenue, Leon was sitting in front of a newly built grave. He was speaking in a low voice, as if Ching hadn't left yet. Not too far away, a sound shell was playing a program from a music station. The soothing and light sound of wind and bamboo music had always been Ching's favorite. But suddenly, the song stopped. An urgent news was broadcasted through a sweet woman's voice. This station has the latest news. A guest priest of Moon Praying Shrine has left for unknown reasons. Starting today, he has officially separated himself from Moon Praying Shrine and will no longer be related to each other. This is the first time in the last 10 years that Moon Praying Shrine has released news on the sound shell of the capital city. According to the judgment of a special commentator of this station, this might be a sign that the relationship between Moon Praying Shrine and the capital city is easing. There was still much more to come, but Leon couldn't hear any of it. He turned around, revealing his pale and unshaven face. He muttered, "Teacher, is that you, Princess Mansion?" Princess Lushy was stunned for a long time. Then, she lowered her head. She already knew that Yu had rejected her, so whether he lived or died had nothing to do with her. But why did she still feel so empty in her heart? Why did she feel so worried? Princess Lushy clenched her teeth, scolding herself for lacking ambition. That blind, hateful, arrogant bastard. If that fellow died, then he died. Why did she care about him? There were so many words to describe him, but perhaps the most important one was that he lacked vision. Looking at the edge of the capital city and listening to the sounds coming from the sound shell stations on both sides of the street, Yu smiled. He sighed inwardly at the control of the priests. Indeed, it was time to step out of the capital city. Suddenly, Yu felt something. He turned to look at a tall building in the distance. It was far away, but even with his keen eyesight, he still couldn't clearly make out who it was. But that cold and powerful aura, that gaze that was as sharp as an arrow, instantly told him that the one standing there was the Whale Sovereign. Perhaps the Whale Sovereign had already discovered him the moment he stepped out of the Great Glory Gambling Hall. It was only after Moon Praying Shrine made their stance clear that he revealed his true aura. Bang! Yu stepped forwards and shot into the skies. His black robes were directly torn apart by a formidable strength. Blood-red flames ignited and he howled into the distance like a meteor. This sudden scene attracted the attention of countless people. Some people didn't clearly see who it was, but there were also those that did. Their eyes widened, filled with shock. Within the royal palace, within the grand hall, the sea sovereign suddenly revealed a helpless smile. This Yu, he is deliberately making things difficult for us. It's clear that in his heart he holds a grudge against us for allowing him to do this. The old turtle humphed. Serves him right. Who told him to not know what's good for him? He refused the princess and also refused that little girl Yaya. Does he really think he is someone we can't do without? The sea sovereign smiled. Does Mr. believe that he can leave here alive? The old turtle was silent for a moment. He said, "There's only a 20% chance." To think there's a 20% chance. It seems that Mr. favors him greatly. But this solitude believes that he doesn't even have a chance. Your Majesty, why do you say this? The Whale Sovereign is even stronger. The voice on the dragon throne was light, a bit rueful. These words were simple, but the meaning behind them wasn't. In particular, when it came from the sea sovereign, the old turtle's complexion instantly turned dignified. Your Majesty, are you saying that he made a breakthrough? This solitude also discovered this not too long ago. I cannot help but acknowledge that this cousin of mine, who I have never been close to since childhood, is truly a fierce character. Unfortunately, this solitude cannot use him. The old turtle bitterly smiled. If that's the case, then this time Chinyu really is dead. He felt a bit regretful. After all, putting aside Chinyu's status as a human, whether it was cultivation, methods, or character, this was the junior he admired the most. There was no one else, at least not now. On a tall building, the whale sovereign wore black armor. He indifferently looked at the blood-red beam of light that shot into the skies. His face was as cold and callous as stone, without the least bit of emotion. Like this, he calmly watched as Chinyu escaped, as if he didn't care at all. But, he was like a god that stood above the highest heavens, confident and graceful, as if everything was under his control. Suddenly, the whale sovereign, who was leaning against the railing, suddenly twisted and vanished from sight. Then, a crack appeared where he vanished, followed by a second, a third. In the blink of an eye, it spread out like a dense spider web. The entire tall building collapsed in a single breath of time. It was instantly released by a formidable strength, shattering it into countless pieces. Then, an earth-shaking and terrifying sound rang out in the air. This was the sound of the air being torn apart. The whale sovereign had already made his move. As he walked through the air, his figure flickered and then vanished. Like this, many whale sovereigns appeared in the sky, disappearing from the capital city. One red, one black, they pierced through the skies like bolts of lightning, howling into the distance. Countless sea folk watched. Some were inexplicably surprised, but some were well aware that this was a late hunt. However, they didn't know whether or not the incomparably powerful whale sovereign would be able to successfully kill his prey after several failures. Chapter 190. Chinyu soon discovered that he had been too optimistic and had underestimated the whale sovereign's strength. The whale sovereign was far more formidable than he had revealed. Or, it was more accurate to say that he was far, far stronger. With his current cultivation, if he used the blood escape and increased his speed by 10 times, there shouldn't be anyone at the nascent soul realm that could catch up to him. The whale sovereign had done it. Although he couldn't shorten the distance between them for a time, this was more than enough for the whale sovereign. All he needed to do now was bite down on Chinyu. Then, there would come a time when he wouldn't be able to use the blood escape. At that time, Chinyu would be extremely weak and standing up would be difficult. The whale sovereign would only need to gently reach out a hand to take his head. They had already left the capital city, so a great deal of time had passed. Chinyu sighed inwardly. He now knew that the whale sovereign could chase him forever. In fact, he even had the thoughts of chasing prey. He wanted Chinyu to tire out and weaken, and then he could easily kill him like he said before. So, if there wasn't an accident, he shouldn't be able to escape. Countless thoughts raced through Chinyu's mind. He imagined countless possibilities, but he discovered that no matter what, none of them could protect his life. As for the outside world, there was no longer any strength he could borrow. In truth, Chinyu felt a bit of regret. No matter if he agreed to Moon Praying Shrine or Sega City, he would still be safe. But this regret only flashed for a moment before it was erased by his powerful will. This was because Chinyu knew that it wouldn't solve any problems and would only soften his will. Since he couldn't escape, then he wouldn't. Rather than exhausting all his strength in the process, he might as well turn around and fight. Although there was almost no chance of winning, if he risked his life he might be able to tear off a few pieces of meat from the whale sovereign's body. If he died, he had to die with some meaning. As Chinyu thought this, he stopped. The blazing blood-red flames around him converged, revealing his pale face. No, even if he died, there was still something he had to do. So in the next moment, the blood-red flames burned once more, rising up, rising up. With a loud rumbling sound, a giant bulge appeared on the surface of the sea. Then, it collapsed and seawater recklessly surged in all directions. Chin-yu looked up at the sun that he hadn't seen in a long time. He took a deep breath and muttered, "That's right. If I die, I should die under the sun." Bang! The seawater shattered once more, and countless water droplets shot out in all directions. Each droplet contained an extremely terrifying power. Even a mountain would be easily turned into a sieve by these water droplets. The whale's sovereign stepped forwards. His black armor combined with his heaven-shaking aura made him seem like a demon god descending from the heavens. He glanced at Chin-yu and then swept his eyes around. After determining that there wasn't anything wrong, he lightly said, "I thought you had arranged some sort of trap." Chin-yu smiled. "It's just that I don't want to die at the bottom of the sea. After all, I am a human. In some aspects, I have different ideas from the sea races. Moreover, the feeling of basking in the sun is really good." The whale's sovereign shook his head. "I don't like it." He looked up at the sun. "If you want to borrow the power of the sun to try and suppress my cultivation, then I'll have to disappoint you. I'm not restrained. After all, once one's cultivation reaches this level, leaving the sea region for a short period of time won't have any effect." Chin-yu didn't explain anything. He only said a few more words because he wanted to live a little longer. Since the whale's sovereign wasn't in a hurry to attack, he naturally wasn't in a hurry either. As he thought, there was a reason why the whale's sovereign wasn't in a hurry to kill him. "Chin-yu, you know that I will definitely kill you, and it is impossible for me to let you go. So, let's be honest with each other. Tell me, just what did you rely on to cure the vines beneath the royal palace and also moon-praying shrine Saint Flower? If you tell me, I can give you a quick death. Otherwise, I guarantee that you will regret ever appearing in this world." This was a threat, but when he said it, there was a strange sense of truth to it, as if it were a matter of course. As if whatever he said, he would definitely be able to do it. This was a natural and unintentional display of confidence. Even now, Chin-yu still couldn't understand why the whale's sovereign had this sort of characteristic. This was because when one's cultivation reached the limits of nascent soul and nearly touched upon the divine soul, one's own soul would quietly transform, giving birth to a vast and formidable self-confidence that could contain the world. But this didn't affect Chin-yu, because he knew that the whale's sovereign could do it. So, he was silent for several breaths of time. Just as the whale's sovereign thought that he would relent, he gently shook his head. "I also want to kill you, but unfortunately, I don't have the chance. So, right now, I just want to live a little longer. I know the method to cure you, but I won't tell you. I'm sorry, perhaps because I'm about to die, I'm a bit nervous right now. If there are any places where my words aren't clear, I ask that you forgive me." The whale's sovereign's eyes were ice cold. "I will find out." He lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The world was quiet, without the least bit of sound. Even the sound of the wind on the sea surface had vanished. Then, this sudden silence was suddenly broken without warning. A giant hand condensed from seawater rose up from the sea. Wherever it passed, space would twist. It was like a legendary ancient sea demon as it grasped towards Chin-yu. Before it arrived, an invisible pressure left him unable to breathe. His black robes stiffened like iron, sticking to his body, unable to move at all. This was the whale's sovereign's true strength. Moreover, he should have been holding back because he wanted to crush Chin-yu and force him to reveal what he needed. If he simply wanted to kill Chin-yu, then perhaps this palm would have been more than enough. A self-deprecating thought rose up in Chin-yu's mind. So he had painstakingly cultivated to this day, and yet he was still a character that could be casually erased by others. He was indeed a minor character amongst minor characters, cannon fodder amongst cannon fodder. And there was also that cheap senior apprentice brother of pill crucibles. He said that he was an inborn fortune-teller, but he had actually believed him. He really was an old swindler. As he thought this, Chinyu attacked. Facing the whale sovereign, he couldn't use any other methods. So, although it was a bit tacky, he still used the boundless blue finger. Winds and clouds rose up once more. Black robes surged in heaven and earth, spiritual strength howled forwards. Then, the strength of this finger collided with the giant hand of seawater. There wasn't anything fancy about it, it was only a contest of absolute strength. It was clear that in this confrontation, Chinyu was at an absolute disadvantage. Thus, the boundless blue finger trembled and collapsed. Then, through some unknown method, it destroyed the giant hand of seawater along with it. Blood gushed out from every orifice of his head and he tumbled backwards. The whale's sovereign frowned. He had faced this supernatural finger before, but it seemed different from today. He slowly said, "This finger of yours, what is it called?" "Boundless blue finger, cough cough, it's something I learned from a bull after I escaped a calamity." To a certain degree, this was the truth. But to the whale's sovereign, this was nothing more than naked mockery. So, he nodded and said, "You have another thing on you that I want to obtain." "That's good." Chinyu coughed violently. "Don't be so vague with your words, otherwise I really might be scared." "What a sharp tongue." The whale's sovereign lifted a hand and pushed forwards. This was the advantage of being a master. They didn't need any fancy moves. With just a raise of their hand, they could possess a heaven-shaking strength. Thus, the torrential waves suddenly surged forth, roaring as they rushed forwards. Layer upon layer, as if they wanted to rush to the ends of the world. Standing from afar, this might be a shocking scene. Then, there would be some artistic youths who would be stirred up and filled with emotion. They might even write a magnificent poem, such as, "The great river flows east, the waves wash away everything, fine, this was a sea, not a river." But, as long as one could understand the general meaning, it was fine. After all, literature was all about seeming right and wrong. But facing this, Chinyu didn't have the slightest bit of appreciation in his heart. As he was shaken by the overwhelming aura and vomited blood, he lowered his voice and cursed, "This is really a fucking great wave." He struggled to lift a hand. His Dantian sea began to tremble. This was the strength of his 5-element golden cores being galvanized to the limit. Then, above his 5 fingers, a ball of light appeared. White, black, blue, red, yellow, 5 colors. With the cry of swords, the 5-element swords began to bloom once more in the world after many, many years. Unfortunately, this might also be the last time they would appear. Bang, bang, the 5-element swords formed a circle, rapidly spinning as they thrust out. As the great waves arrived, they were pierced through by their sharp strength. The area that was torn open was just enough to hold Chinyu. So, even though he was shaken by the strength contained in the great waves and vomited blood again and again, when the waves passed and rumbled into the distance, Chinyu was still standing there. Of course, his appearance was quite miserable. His robes were in tatters and there were countless wounds on his body. Blood wildly flowed out, dripping down the corners of his clothes. But this far surpassed the whale sovereign's expectations. His eyes brightened and he smiled at Chinyu. "How amazing! So you actually grasped such a formidable strength. Is this the power of the 5 elements?" As he praised, his eyes became increasingly cold. From the bottom of his heart, he believed that his decision to kill Chinyu was the correct one. Otherwise, in a few more years, who knew to what extent this human brat who was struggling to survive like a bug he had crushed today would grow to Perhaps there really was a chance that he would be able to threaten him. But now, there was no chance. The third. The whale's sovereign smile faded. I hope that you can give me another pleasant surprise. He began to chant some special syllable. Then, he lifted a hand and pointed it at Qin Yu. That's right, this time it was the whale's sovereign who had pointed a finger at Qin Yu. The skies suddenly darkened. A thin black finger appeared without warning, as if there was a black hole in the void behind it that connected to different worlds. Qin Yu forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood. He felt his chest relax a little, at the very least, his breathing wasn't so uncomfortable. He looked up at the thin finger and thought that if he used such a big move now, it would be too much of him. He really didn't have the strength to attack again. He had nearly exhausted all of his magic power and there wasn't a single part of his body that wasn't aching. If it weren't for his firm will, he feared he would have already fallen to the ground. If there was a method that didn't require exhaustion, then he might as well give it a try. As he thought this, the whale sovereign's voice faintly echoed out. The strange syllables were vast and grand, filled with ancient majesty. Chapter 191. His consciousness was originally a bit blurry, but the flower sent by the saint flower within him seemed to slow down by a beat. It finally began to gush out strength. As a result, it was like a gush of warm water was flowing within his body. The serious injuries in his body that were on the verge of collapse were quickly contained and healed. This was truly worthy of being Moon Praying Shrine Saint Flower. Even a single flower possessed such astonishing strength. Unfortunately, in the current situation, it seemed useless. After all, the whale sovereign's ultimate move was about to arrive. Qin Yu simply didn't realize this. He furrowed his eyebrows together. Because his injuries had been alleviated and his consciousness had been restored, it began to rapidly spin. These syllables, Qin Yu's eyes brightened. He suddenly recalled that this was a strange memory that had appeared in his mind after he received the gift from the underground vine. It was these syllables. Although they weren't the same, they should belong to the same language. For the time being, he could classify these syllables as a mystical language. He looked up at the thin black finger and pursed his lips. This was because he felt that even if there was only the tiniest bit of hope, he should still give it a try. Otherwise, he would regret it even if he died. Thus, the memory in his mind was flipped open. The strange syllables sang in his soul and a sea chart phantom unfurled above his head. Countless islands shined like precious treasures. Capital city, living quarters of the priests. Originally, as servants of the sea spirit, some tribes called them noble divine servants. They lived in the grand and magnificent sea god palace. Unfortunately, ever since the rise of royal power many years ago, when the capital city's sea god palace's plaque was taken down, no one dared to call it by this name again. Of course, there were many reasons for this. The priests were related to the change in royal power in the past, but that was another story altogether. Let's turn our gazes back here. This massive palace that had lost its plaque hadn't been properly maintained. Now, within its grand and boundless aura, there was a hint of decay mixed in. The mottled murals, the water-stained ceiling, the dim light, all of this perfectly wove together to form such a scene. In the largest hall, beneath the towering sea spirit statue, a massive number of priests were gathered. Almost all of the high-level priests of the capital city had gathered here. If someone else were to appear here, they would be surprised to discover that these priests who weren't valued at all were actually using some unknown method to watch the battle between the whale sovereign and Qin Yu in the distance. Even though the image was a little distorted and blurry, he could still roughly make out the situation. Most of them had nervous expressions on their faces as they argued in hushed voices. Everyone was extremely solemn, as if they were discussing something extremely important. He's a human. So what if you're a human? 10 hours of baptism is enough to prove everything. I still don't agree. Those who agree, please vote. In the end, there is no direct evidence to prove that he was chosen. The priests finally managed to reach a consensus. If Yu couldn't produce conclusive evidence, then they wouldn't do anything. The price was simply too great. Moreover, once they made a move, everything they had been hiding would be exposed. You will regret this. The one who roared was one of the priests responsible for presiding over the sea spirit baptism that day. His eyes were filled with anger. The sea spirit has already clearly conveyed its will, but you stubborn and cowardly fellows are still here arguing and arguing. After today, there will surely be the wrath of the sea spirit descending upon us. He turned around and left with the priests that supported him. But at this time, there was a sudden cry in their ears. It was a cry of shock, joy, and disbelief. Several priests turned around and saw what was happening in the diagram. The sea diagram had already appeared. An impulse appeared in Yu's soul, so strong that he couldn't resist it at all. Thus, he lifted his hand and locked onto the sea diagram. Then, he pointed at a black dot of light. Yu didn't know what this black dot of light represented. He only instinctively believed that this was the place he needed to place his finger on. Then, Yu truly understood what this black dot of light was, as well as what sort of gift the underground vine had given him. High in the skies, beneath the great sun, space suddenly twisted, as if some formidable strength were about to gush out from within. In the next moment, space broke apart and a terrifying beam of light shot out, rumbling towards the whale sovereign on the sea surface in a straight line. It was hard to describe how formidable this beam of light was. It was like a rushing river, vast and aboveboard, as if it had the strength to erase all. It was like an arrow shot by a heavenly god, impossible to resist. The whale sovereign's complexion changed. For the first time, he revealed a look of alarm and anger. His eyes widened as if he had seen something unbelievable. But in the next moment, he reacted. With a deep roar, he lifted his hands and a rich black light gushed out from his black armor, condensing into a black sphere of light that covered him within. Then, this black sphere of light was struck by the beam of light and swallowed up. Bang! The sea surface violently collapsed, forming a straight and deep hole. Endless seawater tumbled about, roaring into the distance. Like this, without warning, a tsunami had appeared. Yu was stunned. He only had time to think, so it wasn't an illusion, the whale sovereign's finger had arrived. His ears immediately buzzed as if he had lost his sense of hearing. Then, his body sank downwards. His head spun and he vomited. Then, what spread out was an extremely horrifying pain. It was like a tide, spreading to his limbs and bones. Wherever it passed, his bones, flesh, and blood were all crushed. It was like a person was placed beneath a giant millstone and then ruthlessly thrown down from a high place. Yu had always believed that his will was extremely firm. Even if his flesh was cut and his bones were scraped, he could still withstand it. But it was clear that this pain had surpassed the limits of what he could withstand. Thus, he was only able to persist for several breaths of time before his consciousness sank and he fell into endless darkness. The seawater roared. The beam of light had already vanished, but the effects it caused were still fermenting and spreading. In the bottomless pit in the sea, the whale sovereign emerged, his complexion pale. Most of his black armor was broken and blood flowed out from the cracks. It was clear that after withstanding the direct bombardment of the beam of light, he had suffered severe injuries. Even so, the whale sovereign's aura was still formidable. His oppressive aura was like an invisible spear that pierced into the horizon. He flicked his sleeves and endless seawater was shaken away. Then, Yu's unconscious figure was revealed. He was being pulled by an invisible strength towards him. As his eyes fell on Yu, the whale sovereign furrowed his eyebrows. There was a trace of caution and fear in his eyes. The method to treat the sea spirit, the boundless blue finger, the power of the 5 elements, Chinyu had already given him far too many pleasant surprises. But this last one was a bit too much. If it weren't for the fact that his cultivation had already made a breakthrough and he was on the same level as His Majesty, then he feared he would have been pulverized by that beam of light. This was the will of the sea spirit. A human had actually obtained the legendary will of the sea spirit. How comical was this? But this was the truth. The naked truth was placed in front of him, and it was something he had personally experienced just now. Could such a person be allowed to live? The whale sovereign was incomparably anxious to obtain everything on Chinyu's body, especially the will of the sea spirit. But his instincts constantly warned him that if he didn't act now, he would never have another chance to kill Chinyu. Thus, the tenacious and decisive whale sovereign revealed a rare moment of hesitation. After losing their plaque, the priests of Sea God Palace that were just about to leave in anger began to roar out. Evidence, this is the evidence you all wanted. The messenger chosen by the sea spirit, the hope to save the priests, was nearly destroyed by your own hands. He's still alive. What are you waiting for? Save him. This time, there were no other voices in the hall. The priests were ashamed and afraid, but even more ecstatic and determined. They had bitterly waited for countless years. The messenger of the sea spirit had finally appeared. Then, they had to attack. No matter the cost, they had to protect him. Transcendent faith, with our humble lives, we beg for your strength to descend and punish the evil of the sea region. The priests spoke in unison. Their voices were solemn and dignified, containing an incomparably powerful pressure. Every syllable seemed to be driven by their lives. The sea spirit statue was that of a woman. Beneath her blue dress was a noble and dignified figure. At this time, her gentle eyes began to shine and she grasped a scepter in her hands. A powerful aura suddenly erupted in the capital city. All of the sea folk could clearly feel it. They looked up to see a figure similar to the sea spirit statue descend upon the capital city. She opened her eyes and looked into the distance. Within the royal palace, the moment that the sea spirit figure appeared, the sea sovereign fiercely looked up. His eyes exploded with a divine light and a terrifying aura erupted from him. Across from him, the old turtle's robes fluttered. He stuffily coughed and was forced back dozens of feet by this aura. From this, it could be seen just how powerful the sea sovereign, who hadn't truly attacked until now, was. Priest, a deep and low voice echoed through the hall. This was because unconsciously, there was a formidable cultivation mixed in. For the sea sovereign to lose his composure, it could be seen that his heart was surging. He wasn't as calm as he appeared on the surface. The old turtle was also shaken. In particular, when he sensed the direction that the sea spirit figure was looking in, his shaking became even more clear. After several breaths of time, the sea sovereign's eyes were restored to tranquility. At the very least, there wasn't the least bit of surprise on his face. "Mister, what do you think the priests are doing today?" The old turtle hesitated. "Chinyu." The sea sovereign nodded. "This solitude also thinks so. It seems that the priests have already found the person they have been waiting for. I just didn't think it would be a human." He paused for a moment and continued to say, "It seems that this solitude was wrong in the end. Chinyu might not die today." "No, he definitely won't die." The old turtle thought for a moment and nodded. With the stubbornness of those crazed priests, since they had taken action, that meant they had set their sights on Chinyu. Then, they would certainly disregard everything to protect Chinyu's life. This could be seen from how they summoned the sea spirit phantom to descend. The pitiful whale sovereign thought that he had found the best opportunity, but he never imagined that he would run into a group of madmen that didn't care about their lives. Chapter 192. The whale sovereign was an extremely confident person, otherwise he wouldn't have dared to stand in front of the incomparably powerful His Majesty. And the facts proved that he had the qualifications to be confident. Even though the royal palace already knew of his thoughts these past years, they still hadn't been able to do anything to him. This was the best proof of this. For such a confident and formidable whale sovereign to suddenly hesitate was an inconceivable matter in itself. Thus, in just several breaths of time, he made his decision. Even if he couldn't obtain what Chinyu had, he would still be the powerful whale sovereign. If he continued to wait, there would come a day when he would become the true unsurpassed ruler of the sea region. Of this, he had sufficient confidence. On the other hand, if Chinyu didn't die and some other accident occurred, it was possible that he would encounter great trouble in the future. After pausing for several breaths of time, the whale sovereign chose to follow his heart. He would suppress what he seized and thoroughly kill Chinyu. To make such a decision in such a situation proved just how strong his will was. But in the end, he was delayed. Even if it was only the blink of an eye, some things were like this. If he missed it, he missed it. Moreover, there would never be another chance in the future. The whale sovereign would soon learn of this. He lifted a hand and a terrifying aura began to gather. Just as he was about to press down, his complexion changed and he looked up. A formidable strength arrived without warning, covering the whale sovereign. In the next moment, he was pressed deep into the sea. Then, a clear palm print appeared on the surface of the sea. It was slender and beautiful, one could see that it came from a woman. What followed was a noble and magnificent aura, one that left one in awe and reverence in the depths of their hearts. It was like the descent of a god. And to the sea folk, this was no different from a god taking action. The aura was clear, like a lantern in the darkness. Beneath the five-fingered palm print, the whale sovereign's angry roar echoed out. Priests, why? This strength was something that only the priests could use. On the Sea Spirit Day, without the cooperation of the priests, it was impossible to smoothly carry out their plan to create a bloody massacre. They had already chosen to rely on him, and he had also made a promise that he would definitely keep. But now, why did they stop him? Why did they save Chinyu? Could it be that these damned stupid priests really believed that Chinyu was the one chosen by the sea spirit? He was a human, he was only a human. The rage in his heart could nearly ignite the skies and burn all things to ashes. But facing the power of the sea spirits summoned by the priests, he could only roar as he was pushed deep into the sea. Berserk energy bombarded the seal, nearly tearing it apart several times. However, in the next instant, it was forcibly suppressed once more. The whale sovereign understood that in that brief moment of hesitation, he had lost the chance to kill Chinyu. Emotions such as regret did not appear at all. Absolute willpower allowed him to always remain calm and confident, never questioning his own decisions. He looked up, his eyes seeming to pierce through the endless sea water. He saw Chinyu wrapped in an invisible strength as he flew into the distance. You will come to kill me, right? The whale sovereign said in a soft voice. I will wait for you. Rumble, the seawater continued to tumble. He was suppressed, sinking, and sinking. Beneath the sea spirit sculpture, the priests slumped to the ground. Several of them twitched and foamed at the mouth. It was clear to the naked eye that they were much older than before. In particular, the priest at the front responsible for summoning the power of the sea spirit. His condition was even more serious. Layers of wrinkles piled up on his face. The low-level priests that had been waiting for a long time rushed in to save people. But unlike them, who had nervous expressions and red eyes, all of the priests that were still conscious had satisfied smiles on their faces. To be able to save the messenger of the sea spirit, to them, any price was worth it. After this matter is over, we will have to give an explanation to the royal palace. Take back some of the arrangements. Tell the relevant people to stay in hiding for an indefinite period of time. No matter what, we'll have to hand over some people and things that are of sufficient importance. After all, Our Majesty will not be satisfied so easily. Since we have decided to act, we have naturally made preparations. I believe that everyone will understand and support us. Several incomparably old priests struggled to stand up. Their sagging skin was a bit horrifying, but their expressions were sacred and calm. We will bear the consequences. Let us use these old bones to preserve some of the flesh and blood of the priests of the capital city. Walala, in the hall, all the priests fell to their knees and bowed. Thank you for your benevolence. The whale sovereign had failed. Although the priests were an incomparably united group, in any group there would always be those with weak wills or those with ulterior motives. Thus, this news inevitably spread through the high-level circles of the capital city. As for the whale sovereign, he vanished without a trace after that day. Without a doubt, this was the strongest evidence of this result. The intervention of the priests was unexpected. Countless sea folk sighed. Qin Yu was indeed lucky. Even when facing the terrifying whale sovereign, he was still able to escape alive. The Qin family's situation was a little better. Although they were still ignored, no one dared to casually plunder from them anymore. Of course, they had already obtained more than enough benefits from their previous actions. Qin Yu hadn't died, then, even if it was impossible, it was better to leave some leeway open. The longer the inheritance and the deeper the background of a great clan, the more cautious they would be in their actions. They could ruthlessly and mercilessly kill countless people, but they could also let go of the fat meat in their mouths just because they were uncertain. No matter what her thoughts were, after Madame Qing paid her respects to Qingqing, she wiped away her teary eyes and told this matter to Leon. Teacher, are you still alive? I knew that you wouldn't die. He looked at Qingqing's tombstone. Her bright smile was etched upon it, and her eyes seemed to stare at him, never leaving him. After a long time, Leon stood up. He said in a soft voice, Qingqing, I told you that teacher is a very admirable person. He has an incomparably firm will, and it seems that no danger or predicament can stop him. If teacher can do it, then as his disciple, I can also do it. For the following period of time, perhaps I won't be able to accompany you. I will try my best to live on, to live a better life and become a truly great figure. Then, I will wait for the day when teacher returns and I can help him kill the whale sovereign. I know that teacher must have these thoughts. Since he hasn't died, he absolutely won't give up. So, Qingqing, please bless me so that I can succeed. Leon cleaned up, shaved off his beard, and changed into a new robe. Then, he pushed open the doors and left the massive courtyard. Not long after, he appeared outside Sea Spirit Pavilion. After stating his identity and the reason for his visit, he was quickly let in. Sang Ye received him. The corners of her lips curved up in a smile, as if she were in a very good mood. Leon, looking at your current appearance, you should know some things. Yes, I can tell you that your teacher is still alive. Her voice was light and her expression was gentle, revealing a sense of distance. She had perfectly grasped the scale of a superior. In the end, she was a girl from Sega City. In the future, she would inherit 2 massive businesses, so how could she possibly be pure and naive? That was only something specific to a certain person. Leon bowed. Miss, I hope that in the future, I can obtain your help so that I can become stronger. Sang Ye smiled. Of course. This is my promise to your teacher. Then, come back with me to Sega City. It is a very beautiful place, I'm sure you will like it. Her eyes flashed. Sometimes, death isn't the end. Leon, I hope that you can remember this. Leon wanted to ask more but was refused by the young girl. She only smiled and said, "When you are strong enough, you will naturally know the secrets you should know." Not long after, the heavily guarded carriage left the capital city. With the loud cry of a killer whale, the convoy quickly disappeared into the depths of the dark sea. Leon looked at the constantly shrinking capital city. With a possible and unbelievable thought in his mind, he said in a soft voice, "Ching-ching, wait for me to return." Great Glory Gambling Hole. Alright, this name was indeed a bit tacky. It didn't have any sense of beauty or texture. The Lord Priest turned to look at the plaque, wondering whether or not he should change the name. "Lord Priest, everything has been prepared. We can leave at any time." The vice priest bowed. Although his complexion was solemn, there was a hint of relaxation between his eyebrows. This was different from the nervousness and worry they had when they first arrived. At this time, the entire White Moon tribe was immersed in a deep joy. This relaxed mood caused the Lord Priest to think of Chinyu. He subconsciously frowned, no longer thinking about something as boring as changing the name of the casino. "Let's go." Sensing the Lord Priest's helplessness, the Vice Priest didn't say anything else. He turned and gave some orders. Soon, the wolf riders climbed onto their sea wolves and left. In the carriage, the white-dressed woman accompanied her father. She hesitated for a moment and asked in a soft voice, "Father, is he really still alive?" The Lord Priest rubbed the space between his eyebrows. "My companions from the capital city have made their move. I admit that I have underestimated them all this time." These companions really did make preparations in secret. His eyes flashed. But, what did they discover? To think they would attack without any scruples. I really want to know. As the wolf riders were about to leave the capital city, there was a bit of chaos in the procession. A fair-skinned youth stumbled in and was then chosen by the Lord Priest, becoming his disciple. Of course, this was only information that the sea folk needed to know. The true situation was that the youth had sent a message to Moon Praying Shrine from the Lord Priest. And in return, the Lord Priest had taken him in as a disciple. This was a secret transaction. After speaking several warm words, the Lord Priest seemed satisfied with the youth. He nodded and waved his hand, allowing him to leave. Then, he looked at the video frequency jade slip in his hands. As strength poured in, the jade slip began to display the content stored within. The unfurled sea map, the treasure-like island, and the column of light that fell from the skies. The Lord Priest was silent the entire time. After the video frequency faded away, he sighed. So it's like this. He was a bit stunned and also a bit helpless. There seemed to be a bit of pity mixed in with these emotions. But there was also a bit of relief hidden within. Chapter 193. When Chinyu woke up, he had already been saved. He was on a large ship, but what was most surprising was that the most powerful person on this ship was only an early golden core cultivator. It was clear that they hadn't directly rescued him from the hands of the whale sovereign. If so, then something must have happened while he was unconscious. The pitiful priests of the capital city. Even after paying a heavy price, they weren't able to leave behind the slightest impression in Chinyu's heart. This was because he had imagined His Majesty in the royal palace, Turtle Origin, and even the distant Sega city. But he hadn't thought of the priests at all. Of course, this could also be interpreted as the priests successfully deceiving everyone. Thus, they were able to suddenly intervene and save Chinyu's life. Although it was a bit regretful that he wasn't able to find out why he was still alive, the most important thing was to be alive, right? Chinyu soon put down these thoughts and began to enjoy a rare moment of leisure. Although he didn't know where he was right now, since a human had appeared, he was naturally far away from the depths of the sea region. This was confirmed after several indirect inquiries. The whale's sovereign was strong, strong beyond imagination. But he wasn't a spiritual god, and it was nearly impossible to find him again. He had fresh fish soup to drink every day, but no matter how delicious the fish soup was, if it was like this for half a month, it would be hard to accept. But facing the serious expression of this dark-skinned girl with rough skin, he could only helplessly drink it clean. This fish soup is something I exchanged for with great effort. Only the lords on deck have the qualifications to enjoy it at any time. So, you had best recover as soon as possible. The girl appeared to be 17 to 18 years old. She was small and thin, but there were some places where she wasn't small. Qin Yu had seen sailors laugh and whistle at her more than once. Of course, these fellows with fiery eyes had all been ruthlessly beaten up in the end. It was hard to imagine how such a formidable strength could be contained within such a small and thin body. Could you imagine this beautiful girl carrying a large man and smashing him into the deck? In short, it was a different kind of beauty. Qin Yu didn't care at first. He only smiled and watched. But soon, he discovered that some of the sailors were looking at him strangely. It was the hostility that only existed between two males competing for a mate. After being provoked a few times in the open and in the dark, the girl finally said with a blushing face, "I told them that you're the person I saved, so you're my man." Afraid that Qin Yu would take her seriously, she quickly waved her hand. "This is just a way to stop them from disturbing me. You're not my type, of course, it's not that you're bad, it's just that you don't suit my taste. In short, that's what I mean." Seeing the girl clumsily explain herself to avoid hurting his heart, Qin Yu finally let out a sigh of relief. It turned out that he wasn't the type of person who would attract a large group of women wherever he went. This was too good. So he smiled and said seriously, "No problem." This made the girl feel that he was forcing himself to smile. While feeling a little apologetic, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had told him earlier. Otherwise, if he fell deeper, he would only suffer more in the future. For the next several days of sailing, Qin Yu was called Little C's man. Little C was her given name. She didn't have a surname. In the sea region, this was a relatively normal matter. No one knew how long they would live. There were extremely few children that could grow up by their parents' side. Look at his pale face and thin arms. I can beat him down with a single hand. You need a hand, but I only need 3 fingers. With a casual poke, I can make this boy kneel down and beg for mercy. Little C is so beautiful and so powerful, so how could she take a fancy to him? Is this the legendary pretty boy she loves? I really want to go over and beat him up. You're a man, yet you're letting a woman raise him. Well, he really didn't have the heart to listen to so much. But with his keen sense of hearing, even though Qin Yu had his back to them, he was still able to hear everything clearly. He couldn't stay on the deck any longer. Qin Yu helplessly thought about this. Just as he was about to leave, he discovered that he was blocked by someone. "Brat, leave Little C. Otherwise, you can say goodbye to those white teeth of yours today." The one who angrily roared out was a sailor named Shang Yin. He had his own surname, so on this ship he was likely someone with a high status. He was also one of those who whistled and got beaten up, and he had done so many times. Although he was beaten until he begged for mercy each time, 2 days later he would come back alive and kicking to be a punching bag. If he wasn't addicted to being beaten up, then he really did like Little C. Qin Yu smiled. He nodded, "Okay." Shang Yin was stunned, as if he had choked on his words. He didn't know what to do next. At this time, shouldn't this pretty boy in front of him sternly refuse, shout at him, and then ruthlessly beat him up? But he had actually agreed so directly. He subconsciously turned his head and looked at his several companions in the crowd. They had clearly discovered Shang Yin's helplessness. Someone coldly sneered, "What a coward." Sailors spent most of their lives drifting at sea. Their personalities were rough, and they would fight for those they liked. They wouldn't easily lower their heads. Thus, this voice obtained the approval of everyone. Then, their eyes filled with disdain, as if they were ashamed of him. How can such a coward be worthy of little C? Shang Yin, go and ruthlessly teach him a lesson. Let him remember what kind of person he is and what he should do in the future. Right, ruthlessly beat him up. Black out his eyes and break his arms. The women of the sea are only worthy of the brave, not this pretty boy. The crowd was riled up. Thinking about it, their thoughts were like this: we've already taken off our pants and you're still like this? This is too excessive. To watch the fun, the bigger the better. Shang Yin coldly sneered. His knuckles crackled as he walked over, as if saying that this brat was dead for sure. Qin Yu revealed a helpless smile. He originally wanted to wait here until his injuries were healed before leaving. But now, it seemed that he wouldn't have the chance to do so. Just as he was about to be gentle and not blow up this brat in front of him, he heard the sound of familiar footsteps. He hurriedly drew back. Shang Yin chased after him. A petite figure blocked his path. Then, with a loud shout, his massive body was ruthlessly tossed away, crashing into the deck. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground caused the surrounding sailors to feel their teeth ache. They looked up at the sky, discussing how the weather was so good today. They quickly fled. Little C turned and glanced at Qin Yu. "Are you all right?" Qin Yu smiled. "You came just in time, so I'm fine." "I'm sorry, I didn't think, it's nothing. Compared to you saving me, this isn't anything at all." Qin Yu waved his hand. "I think it's better for us to return to the cabin. Then, goodbye." Looking at his departing back, the girl's eyes flashed with a bit of confusion. But soon, it became firm. The night was even more dangerous for large ships sailing in the sea. The sailors' line of sight was affected, but the sea monsters in the sea were actually more active. Little C was responsible for keeping watch at night. Although she was small and petite, amongst the humans of the sea where strength represented everything, she relied on her own strength to obtain considerable authority. There was a team of several dozen sailors that she was responsible for leading. The night was quiet. It seemed that during this period of time, many of the sea monsters had disappeared, and it felt as if there had been less trouble. After changing shifts, Little C ruthlessly kicked the brat's butt. Then, she returned to the cabin and took off her thick leather wallet. The cabin was divided into 2 rooms. Looking at one of the closed doors, Little C hesitated for a moment. Then, she walked over and knocked. A light lit up. "Please enter." She pushed open the door. Qin Yu was neatly dressed and sitting at a small table in the cabin. He smiled and said, "It's so late, why aren't you sleeping yet?" Little C walked over and sat down. She took a deep breath and the tightness in her chest became even more striking. She didn't notice this. She stared into Qin Yu's eyes and earnestly said, "I know you aren't an ordinary person." Qin Yu's eyes flashed. "The one who helped me hide my storage ring was you." When he woke up, his storage ring was at his chest. It was clear that someone had taken it from him. If it were any other cultivator on the ship, this matter would have long since spread out. Or, there would have been people secretly monitoring his every move. But during this period of time, everything had been calm and peaceful. Qin Yu hadn't discovered anything wrong, so someone must have been hiding everything. Qin Yu guessed that it was Little C. But, she didn't say anything and he pretended to be confused. But, it was clear that this girl was preparing to say something to him tonight. Yes. Little C nodded. I admit that I once tried to open your storage ring. But my cultivation was too low, so there was no way I could do it. Yu smiled. His cultivation was gradually rising, his soul was even more formidable. How could he not put some effort into his storage ring? If a Foundation Establishment Realm girl could casually open his storage ring, that could only mean he had lived long enough. I thank you for saving me. Then, is there anything I can help you with? Little C clenched her teeth. I know that you will eventually leave. If you want to go somewhere else in the sea region, I want a magic tool that I can use to protect myself. But, if you want to return to land, I beg you to take me with you. Yu arched an eyebrow. You don't like it here? Little C nodded. I don't like it. I have never liked it. But, I have no choice. When my mother died, she told me that if I had a chance, I should leave this sea. It isn't a place for us humans, and it isn't suitable for women to live in. I've grown up and seen many things, and I believe more and more that my mother was right. So, as long as there is a chance to leave the sea region, I won't miss it. Yu said, how do you know that I have the strength to take you away? After all, the sea region is far too dangerous. Little C thought for a moment. You are very calm. Ever since you woke up, you have been like this. Even when the several lords on the ship came to question you, you weren't afraid. I believe in my own eyes, and I can't be wrong. For someone to be so calm, they must have some confidence. She was truly a smart girl. Yu smiled. Then, I agree to your conditions. When I leave, I will take you with me. Little C was overjoyed. Then, she was a bit nervous. Can you leave a few days later and wait until we return to the island? My mother still has some things that she has always wanted to return to land. I hope that I can bring them with me. Just think of it as her leaving with me. Yu nodded. No problem. I also happen to need several more days. The young girl left with a relaxed and happy expression. Yu closed his eyes. A gust of wind extinguished the candlelight and the room fell into darkness once more. Land. Chapter 194. After sailing for 4 days, an island appeared in their line of sight. Excited cheers rose up from the deck. To those at sea, every time they returned safely from the sea, it was a matter worth celebrating. Faintly, one could hear that some people had agreed to meet at night. After opening the windows, they would press down on their wives and see who could accumulate more firepower during this time. Well, this topic was a bit dirty to the extreme. Little C had a calm expression. After living at sea for so many years, if she couldn't even get used to this, she would have long since been dragged into the bushes. She turned and earnestly said, I just need a bit of time. When I have a chance, I'll immediately leave. How about it? Sensing that she was still a bit worried, Yu didn't say anything. He only nodded. Then, he sucked in a deep breath of the muddy sea breeze and smiled. Even though they were still in the sea, even though this was only a small island, he was still happy to be able to truly set foot on land. Thus, when Shang Yin and the others looked at him with hostility and ridicule, he simply treated it as some unknown gas. After dropping the anchor and fixing the hull of the ship, he paid his respects to some unknown existence that was said to be able to protect the voyage. Only then did the voyage truly come to an end. The pier of the island instantly turned into a bustling sea. Countless people hugged each other, and some impatient sailors were already pulling on the shy women around them as they rushed towards their own residences. Yu stepped on the stone path. He looked around, feeling a bit unfamiliar with this scene and also a bit envious. He didn't know if he would ever have a chance to live such a life in his life. Little C was alone and no one came to pick her up. So, she only glanced at her for a few moments before walking forwards. She had heard that before this she had a stepfather, but for some unknown reason, he had died at home on a rainy night. From then on, many men wanted to enter this courtyard, but they were all coldly rejected by Little C. Thus, Chin-yu could be considered the first man to step into her home in all these years. She could clearly sense that after Chin-yu entered the courtyard, Little C was much quieter than before. She couldn't suppress the icy coldness on her face. Chin-yu thought for a moment and said, "You know, the truth is that wherever I live is the same to me. If you aren't used to it, I can stay somewhere else. Of course, I will keep my promise and bring you with me when I leave." Little C squeezed out a smile. "It's fine, there are enough rooms." Seeing that she didn't want to say anything more, Chin-yu didn't say anything more. Unfortunately, the first night they landed on the island, it rained heavily. Rumble, lightning streaked across the sky, illuminating the small island in the middle of the raging sea, as well as the slightly dilapidated courtyard high above the island. Little C awoke from her dreams. She clutched her head with both hands and screamed in pain. She tightly gripped a knife in her hand, her eyes filled with despair. Suddenly, a pair of hands reached out from the darkness and grabbed her shoulders. A soft voice said, "Relax, relax." At the same time, a warm strength flowed out from those palms, pouring into Little C's body, helping her calm her nerves. The lights lit up, illuminating Chin-yu's face. He had already let go of the girl and was walking towards the door. "If you're still afraid, call me." "Wait." Little C's voice sounded out from behind him. She seemed to hesitate for a moment before saying, "Don't go, stay with me." At this moment, there was no longer the bold and fierce Lil C. She had finally shed her disguise and revealed her true self. Chin-yu turned and smiled. "All right." He sat down at the table and poured 2 cups of tea. He placed one in the girl's hands and drank the other himself. "Don't worry, I won't misunderstand. I'm not your type, am I?" Little C had a bit more embarrassment on her face, but her mood actually calmed down. She smiled and said, "Yes, it's good that you can understand this." She drank a mouthful of water. After a moment of silence, she said in a soft voice, "During the days you were on the ship, those long-tongued fellows must have told you many things. For instance, me." Chin-yu didn't deny it, but he didn't state it either. He only nodded. Little C leaned back on the bed. "Many of them want to know just how that man died in the past. That man I once called my father. That's right, I killed him." Her fingers tightened around the teacup, causing them to pale. Chin-yu furrowed his eyebrows. "If you don't want to say it, you don't have to. You know that I'm not too curious about these things." Little C tilted her head, as if she were analyzing whether what he said was true or false. It was unknown whether she had made a judgment, but she waved her hand. "Just think of it as something I want to say. After all, it's hard to bear for so many years." What else could he say? Chin-yu gestured for her to continue. Little C curled up, her eyes a bit vacant. "In truth, there isn't much to say. It's just a very cliched story. A girl's stepfather raised the girl and wanted to climb into her bed to turn his daughter into a woman. In truth, this isn't strange in the sea region. The girl had already prepared herself for this. But he was too impatient and didn't give the girl a chance to prepare at all. He directly threw himself at her." After a pause, Little C smiled. "This story is also very cliched. I'm sure you've already guessed that the girl in the story is me. I think that what you should be curious about right now is whether or not he succeeded, right?" "Yes, he succeeded. On this bed, on that stormy night, he took possession of my body. After all, at the time he was already a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator. How could a weak little girl possibly escape? It hurt a lot and I lost a lot of blood. At the time, I really didn't think too much about it. I only knew that I had to kill him, I had to kill him. Perhaps in this aspect, women really do learn without a teacher. I tempted him again and again until he was so tired that he collapsed on top of me. Then, I easily cut his neck with a knife. Little C spread out her hands. Here, this is the knife. What's interesting is that this knife was a gift from the girl's stepfather not too long ago on her birthday. And, what's even more interesting is that from that night onwards, the girl could only sleep peacefully on this bed. Except. She pointed out a finger outside the window, her voice filled with relief and helplessness. On such a stormy day. Qin Yu's expression didn't change and his eyes remained calm. This was because in his opinion, this was the only way he could do his best not to hurt the girl. But, it was clear that he had underestimated the girl's strong heart. Little C looked at his current appearance and suddenly smiled. There's no need to be like this. In truth, there are many similar things in the sea region. I just don't like to share them with others, so I've always hidden them. After all, compared to many women in the sea region, I can already be considered lucky. At the very least, I haven't been forced by a second man. Qin Yu smiled, a bit unsure of what to say. Perhaps this was the reason why little C was so impatient to leave the sea region. After a moment of silence, Qin Yu drank the tea in his cup. He listened to the sound of thunder that had already died down. In the sea region, rain always came and went as quickly as it came. He stood up and said, there shouldn't be any more thunder. I'm going back. Little C suddenly said, you can also stay. This isn't my first time, but I'm still clean. Although you aren't my type, I don't mind if it's just one night. Consider it my way of thanking you for not making me feel afraid on this stormy night. Qin Yu coughed. It's late. Go rest early. He pushed open the door and left. The moment he closed the door, he could clearly hear the suppressed laughter of the girl hiding under the blanket. All right, he had been despised. Qin Yu rubbed his nose, a bit sad as he thought this. Then, he also laughed and returned to his room. The next day, the weather was fine and sunny. Little C tidied up the housework and carried all the bedding out to dry. As she saw Qin Yu come out, she naturally greeted him. However, there was a teasing look in her eyes that left Qin Yu feeling helpless. He simply ignored her. He found a chair and placed it in a place where the sun could shine. Then, he lay down and quietly basked in the sun. Dong dong dong, there was the sound of knocking on the door. Little C ran over to open it. Outside was a tall and sturdy man who looked to be in his 30s or 40s. His originally tough and dignified face was ruined by a strange scar on his forehead, making him look a bit funny. Little C, I heard you came back. The man swept his eyes over Qin Yu and then looked away. However, his eyebrows inadvertently furrowed. Little C was very respectful towards him. She bowed and said, yes, teacher. I've returned. It's good that you're fine. If you have any problems with your cultivation, you can come find me. The man said a few more words and then turned to leave. From start to finish, he didn't ask a single question about Qin Yu. It was like he didn't even see him in his eyes. Little C closed the door and turned around. She apologetically said, teacher is a bit proud. Perhaps he heard some bad things about you, so, Qin Yu waved his hand, indicating that he didn't care. He thought for a moment and said, this teacher of yours looks a bit familiar, as if I've seen him somewhere before. The wound on his head, I'm sorry, such a special wound is indeed very eye-catching. Little C covered her mouth and laughed. It's fine if you say these words in the courtyard, but don't mention it outside, otherwise teacher will be angry. He is someone who cares a lot about face, and this injury, it's really, ha ha ha, it's just too funny. The general situation was that not too long ago, little C, this proud teacher, had led them out to the sea to fish. Originally, they had been in a relatively safe sea area and there shouldn't have been any problems. But on that day, there had been a terrifying beam of light that fell down from the heavens. In the surging waves, a sea turtle had been swept up by the seawater and struck his head. Thus, there was this strange wound on his head. This was because a sea turtle had used its hard and thick turtle shell to strike his head. As she finished speaking, little C was still laughing. It was clear that even after such a long time had passed, she still hadn't forgotten the distressed appearance of her teacher that day. Qin Yu was stunned. Then, he also smiled. This was because he finally remembered why this person looked so familiar. Back then, when he received the gift from the underground vine, he had seen the scene that flashed by in a hurry. Now that he thought about it, the person who had been struck in the head by the sea turtle was indeed this person. This was fate. Little C frowned. Why do I feel that your smile is a bit strange? Chapter 195. Originally, little C was worried that she wouldn't be able to find a suitable opportunity to leave. She never imagined that the opportunity would come so soon. There wasn't enough food on the island, and the weather watchers also said that there would be many rainy days in the near future. Thus, it was best to hunt as soon as possible. Of course, the reason there wasn't enough food was because little C's teacher had been severely wounded by the sea turtle and had no choice but to return early. Of course, no one dared to say this out loud. That proud teacher clearly had some prestige. Perhaps it was because he wanted to wash away his shame, or perhaps it was because he wanted to catch that damned sea turtle that had humiliated him, but this time he personally led a group of people out to hunt for food. Little C used the excuse that she needed to take care of a man to stay behind. Of course, this caused Qin Yu to receive many looks of disdain. What gigolo, what sponging off a woman, and so on. Luckily, Qin Yu's heart was strong enough that he was able to remain indifferent to these matters. Little C curiously asked him why, but Qin Yu only smiled and didn't explain. Did he have to say that in his opinion, whether it was her teacher or that sailor friend that was bursting with male hormones, they were all as weak as bubbles that would burst with a single poke? Because he didn't care, he didn't care. If he wanted them to shut up, it would be a simple matter. To borrow a famous saying, a lion will never be an enemy of an ant. Fine, I made this up, but that's the general meaning. 2 days later, late at night, little C carried a small bundle on her back and led Qin Yu out of the courtyard. Most of the people she was familiar with had already gone out to sea, making leaving much easier. Even though the so-called trouble was only what little C thought. At the seaside, little C looked back. There were only a few lights on the island and it was blurry. She cut off the last bit of reluctance in her eyes and said in a soft voice, "Let's go." Qin Yu flicked his sleeves and a small boat appeared on the sea. Little C's eyes widened and she impatiently ran onto it. The boat wasn't large, but it was exquisitely crafted. As Qin Yu poured in magic power, a layer of light emitted from the hull, isolating it from the seawater. It didn't travel on the surface of the sea, but sank into the sea. Then, it violently tore through the seawater and steadily moved forwards. Little C's eyes widened. The magic treasure of a high-level cultivator far surpassed her imagination. This ship was only a small gift that Qin Yu had received when he used his identity as Ning Qin to travel around the capital city. Perhaps the master of some sea spirit had hoped to use this to obtain a favorable impression from Grandmaster Ning. Therefore, he didn't really care. He turned around and sat down, smiling. "If you like it, I can give it to you after we leave the sea region. Little C whirled around. For me? Really? Chinyu raised his hand. Do I look like I'm lying? Little C screamed, this is great. It's the best ship I've ever seen. She threw herself over to protect him. You're too good, you're too good. An astonishingly soft feeling passed through his body. Chinyu drew back without a trace. As long as you like it. Although he didn't know how Little C had saved him, he still owed her a favor. Giving her a small treasure could put his mind at ease. Little C didn't like the sea region, but after living in the sea for so many years, she clearly knew how important a boat was. She instinctively liked it. She appeared cautious. She touched here and there, a silly smile on her face from time to time. But soon, a broken corpse wrapped in seawater flowed over from afar. She instantly regained her composure and her eyes sharpened. It's someone from the island. Chinyu looked at it several times. The corpse was badly mutilated and should have been bitten by something. It was impossible to make out its appearance, so he had no idea how Little C had judged it. She hesitated for a moment. I know it's a bit excessive, but can we go over and take a look? Our ship is fast enough. If we can save someone then we can. If we can't then we can leave, alright. The girl didn't seem reluctant to leave the sea region. But, as she had grown up here and there were so many people she knew. It wasn't easy for her to make the decision to leave, so how could she not have any attachments? Otherwise, she wouldn't be a person, but a stone. Chinyu nodded. All right. With a thought, the bow of the ship turned slightly, heading towards the direction where the corpse flowed from. On the sea surface, a great battle was raging. Both sides were humans that had come out to hunt and sea monsters that were hiding in the sea region. All life forms in the sea had a chance to transform into sea monsters. Thus, the actions of humans had nothing to do with capturing or eating sea monster tribesmen. It was understandable that they were luring humans into a trap. Today was a perfect bait to kill the human hunters. Two intelligent sea monsters were chasing a school of fish, luring the ship into a trap. Sharks rapidly swam through the seawater. From time to time, they would leap up high and reveal a mouthful of sharp teeth, ruthlessly biting down on a sailor and dragging him into the sea. Highly toxic jellyfish floated around the ship. Their bubble-like bodies swelled up, ready to spit out venom at any moment. All the humans that tried to break out would forever be trapped in the icy cold seawater. Many people had died, but the ship continued to persist. The sides of the ship had cannons that shot out spiritual strength that could also kill a massive number of sea monsters. The sea surface was already dyed red with blood. But as mentioned before, there was no right or wrong between the two sides. It was just that their races were different and their standpoints were different. When the small ship arrived, they just happened to see from afar a giant octopus sea monster wrapping its terrifying tentacles around the ship. It groaned in pain and the hull of the ship began to tilt. It wouldn't be long before the ship was pulled into the seabed and everyone on board would become food for the sea monsters. Little C's complexion paled and her small body shivered. But after several glances, she turned around and tried to maintain her calm. Let's go. In her opinion, such a terrifying sea monster wasn't something that humans could contend with. If they jumped out now, they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. After seeing so many life and death situations, she knew how to make a decision in a life or death situation. If she couldn't save others, then she had to protect her own life first. Chinyu looked at the octopus sea monster. It was massive and in addition to its ferocious appearance, it was extremely shocking. But as for its strength, it was around the middle or late golden core realm. Beneath the gaze of the little girl, he seemed to think for a moment. Then, he said, although the one who saved me was you and there are many people here who don't have a friendly attitude towards me, I still managed to recuperate from my wounds on this ship, and it has shown me graciousness. Moreover, I've been looked down upon by others for so long, and I'm about to leave. If I can't show off my existence and let them understand how blind they are, I will be very disappointed." These words were long-winded and a bit forced, but little C easily caught onto his true meaning. Her eyes widened. This is dangerous." Yu smiled. "It's fine. I'm very strong." After saying these words, there was a flash of light and he flew away. In little C's eyes, Yu had taken a single step and vanished. When he reappeared, he was right next to the ship. Although she knew that if Yu dared to attack, then he must have confidence in himself, when she looked at his tiny body and compared it to the terrifying octopus sea monster, her heart leapt into her throat. What if in truth, there was no what if at all? After so much wind and rain, if something were to happen to such a minor character, then they might as well buy a block of tofu and kill themselves. What Yu did was to lift his hand and gently swipe downwards. A white sword light cut across the edge of the ship as fast as a beam of light. The tentacles that tightly wrapped around the ship that wanted to tear it to shreds and drag it to the seabed were cut off from the middle. Green blood sprayed out like rain. Then, there was the pained roar of the octopus sea monster. Almost half of its tentacles had been cut off and it was completely frightened out of its wits. It didn't even dare to look for who had injured it. It released the other half of its tentacles and turned to flee into the depths of the sea. The other powerful sea monster was a giant sea snake. It had been lurking beneath the sea, waiting for a chance to launch a fatal strike or perhaps a hidden card to deal with the humans. As it saw the octopus sea monster's fate, it was scared half to death. It didn't even want to appear and turned tail and ran away without a trace. The two bosses had already fled, but the remaining low-level sea monsters continued to attack. They had no idea what had happened. Yu released a wisp of his aura. Or rather, it was the aura of the tumor that appeared in the sea. The formidable suppression of a superior instantly caused the bloodthirsty low-level sea monsters to wake up. They screamed together and turned to flee in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the densely packed and aggressive sea demons had all retreated. The people on the ship clearly hadn't regained their composure. Many of the sailors that had been drenched in the octopus sea monster's blood wiped away the blood on their faces and looked up at the sky with astonishment. Thus, Yu put on a pretentious act to the extreme. He smiled and waved his hand. "Everyone, there is no need to thank me. I will be taking little C away. You don't need to miss him." Puff, he fell into the sea and vanished from sight. On the deck, the sailors that had just escaped death all stared with wide eyes, as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight. "It's that pretty boy, did he save us? Stop dreaming. With that useless appearance of his, I can beat him down with a single hand." "I don't believe it either. It must have been some great human lord that was passing by and saved us out of kindness. That boy was just trying to show off along the way." "That's right, didn't he fall into the sea just now? He must have been so scared that his legs went soft. That pretty boy, he couldn't have taken little C away, right? Holy shit, where is he? Catch him, I want to duel him." Beneath the sea, at the bow of the small ship, Yu was bathing in the girl's shocked and incredulous expression. He was originally feeling a bit light-hearted, but when the angry roars of the sailors echoed out from the ship, the atmosphere became strange. The girl's shocked expression also gradually became strange. She even felt as if she were suppressing herself from laughing out loud. These bastards. Yu was so angry that he nearly rushed out and sent them all into the sea. He spent a great deal of effort to suppress the urge to beat them up and started the small ship without expression. He only wanted to get away from these ungrateful things as soon as possible. Chapter 196. 1 month later. On the shores of the sea, a fishing village had fallen silent under the cover of night. Seawater crashed against the shore, bringing a small boat ashore. A faint light circulated on the surface of the boat, illuminating a quiet young man and woman in the cabin. A black-robed man disembarked first. As he stood on dry land, he let out a satisfied sigh. He wondered why he never realized that having one's feet firmly planted on the ground was such a happy thing. He turned and beckoned to the girl. "You've asked me so many questions along the way. Now that we've finally arrived on dry land, how come you're not in a hurry?" This man was Chinyu. Within the cabin, little C was staring at him in a daze. She had been born at sea and grew up at sea. She had an incomparably excited expression. She took out a wooden hairpin from her small bag and cried tears of joy. "Mother, do you see? I've returned to dry land. So this is what it looks like. It really is much, much larger than the island." Chinyu could understand what she was feeling at this time, so he didn't say anything. He just quietly waited. Luckily, this girl had grown up in storms since she was a child and had already forged a formidable mind. She soon regained her composure and her red eyes were filled with surprise and joy. Little C stepped off the boat and gently knelt down. She reached out a hand and gently stroked the ground, her complexion gentle and sincere. After several breaths of time, she looked up and earnestly said, "Thank you." Chinyu smiled. "With Miss Little C accompanying me on the way, I was much less lonely." Little C stood up and smiled. "Now that we've returned to dry land, you have fulfilled your promise. From now on, you don't need to worry about me. Don't worry, you haven't truly seen my abilities yet. It won't be a problem for me to protect myself. I hope that in the near future I can find a husband and then spend the rest of my life with him. That would be enough for me." Chinyu's eyebrows arched up. "Let me ask you something. I hope you don't misunderstand. What is the ideal man in your heart like?" Well, in the end, he was a bit unconvinced. After all, he had seen many outstanding women along the way, but little C was the first to clearly tell him that he wasn't her type. Although he understood that this bit of unwillingness was pointless, young men were often very stupid sometimes. Chinyu was a man and he was also very young, so he was no exception. Little C looked over in amusement. She pouted and said, "I said that you are very good, but you aren't to my taste. What I like is a slender scholar who wears a green robe and stands under a tree with a scroll in his hand. Of course, his face must be fair and his appearance must be handsome. Although this is a little superficial, I am indeed someone who believes in appearance." Chinyu coughed. Was she implying that he wasn't handsome enough? Alright, although this was the truth, liking scholars was really too bad taste. Little C laughed happily, gasping for breath. You're leaving," Chinyu nodded, not denying it. "Then, see you in the future." Chinyu smiled. "Goodbye." He turned around and left. Watching him leave, little C stretched her waist and revealed a happy smile. Then, she walked towards the fishing village. This is the beginning of another story. Chinyu smiled as he walked through the darkness. During this period of time, he had learned a great deal from little C. Such as optimism, such as tenacity. To be able to live with a smile on one's face after suffering was a very impressive thing. Those who could do this were probably also very impressive. Thus, he wasn't too worried, because little C would definitely be able to live a happy life. He actually hoped that she would be able to find a scholar she admired soon and live a peaceful and happy life. As the east turned red and the great sun rose, Chinyu's figure appeared atop a low mountain. A fiery red light covered his entire body, as if he were wearing a blood-red armor. When he entered the sea region, he had only wanted to obtain the 5 elements spiritual objects. Now, his goal had been achieved. Regardless of how many tribulations he had experienced, he had still obtained some harvests. But, while he had escaped unscathed and his cultivation had risen, there was someone else who was suffering. Shan Wugu. Qin Yu whispered. Reason told him that even with his current cultivation, the influence of the demonic path wasn't something he could easily touch. But, some things were like this. Even if you knew it was wrong, you still had to do it. Perhaps this was the reason why people were like this. Shua, Qin Yu shot into the skies, vanishing from sight. 2 days later, within the borders of the Southern Empire, Homehold City. This city was located on the other side of a boundless mountain range. It was incomparably bustling with activity, with countless cultivators entering and exiting every day. It was both a transportation hub and a transmission center for all sorts of information. The demonic path had set up a branch altar here, and the one in charge was an early nascent soul demon, the Blood Guillotine, also known as Bloodthirsty Demon. Because this demon cultivated a cultivation method and suffered a backlash, he had to sleep in an ice coffin all year round, using the cold aura to suppress his boiling blood energy. On the surface, the Homehold City branch altar was the largest purchasing center here. There was no limit to all sorts of treasures, and as long as they were of good quality, they wouldn't be stingy with spirit stones. In this aspect, the demonic path could be considered to have done an excellent job. After all, no matter how vicious and evil they were, if they wanted to gain a foothold and earn benefits, they first needed a good reputation and credibility. Of course, bloody methods couldn't be lacking. The demonic path branch altar also did an excellent job in this aspect. After taking action several times, it allowed everyone to recognize just how cruel and powerful they were. Thus, the branch altar was very peaceful. In these past years, there were very few people that dared to cause trouble in their territory. In the underground chamber, besides a dim green oil lamp, there wasn't anything else. The gloomy light illuminated the stone coffin in the center of the chamber. The coffin was black all over, as if it were made from ink. It even dyed the ground black. Only by approaching it would one discover that this black wasn't pure darkness, but a manifestation of a condensed ice-cold aura. Suddenly, this stone coffin, which contained a terrifying coldness, gently trembled. It cracked open a crack, and a white and delicate finger reached out from inside. It grabbed the coffin lid and gently pushed it open. Immediately, a beautiful woman sat up from within. She had the appearance of a 27 to 28-year-old woman and her skin was as white as snow. At this time, she frowned and 2 traces of blood red appeared in the depths of her eyes. Who is it that dares to be enemies with my demonic path? Are you seeking death? As her voice sounded out, the blackness on the ground spread outwards. In just a breath of time, it occupied the entire underground chamber. Who would have thought that the infamous bloodthirsty demon, who was rumored to tear apart women and devour them, was actually such a beautiful woman, graceful and elegant? Paw, paw, there was the sound of footsteps. As they stepped on the blackness on the ground, there was a faint cracking sound. This was the sound of endless ice condensing into tiny icicles that were breaking apart. Qin Yu walked out from the darkness. He didn't hide his appearance at all and simply looked at her calmly. Within the stone coffin, bloodthirsty demon's eyes narrowed. She couldn't sense the depths of this person. It was like an invisible fog had completely covered up his aura. But without a doubt, this young man was extremely strong. The fact that he wasn't affected at all by the ice-cold aura she released was proof of this. But even more so, it was because of the strong beating heart in his chest. Thump, thump, a faint sound constantly entered her ears, throwing her heart into chaos. Gradually, she found it hard to suppress her desire. What alluring blood! If she could dig out this heart and chew on it, the taste would definitely be wonderful. It would be extremely chewy. Thinking this, bloodthirsty demon stretched out her pale red tongue and licked the corners of her lips. There was an endless sense of savagery, but there was even more temptation. What a strong little brother. If you can serve this big sister well, perhaps I can spare your life. Yu had a calm expression. I admit that you are very beautiful, but I have no interest in old women. So, if possible, please show some respect. There was no need for anything else. Just calling her an old woman was enough. Bloodthirsty demon's complexion stiffened and then darkened. Is that so? Then let big sister show you just how stupid it is to say such words in front of a woman who loves beauty. She lifted a hand and grasped forwards. The air was icy cold. Like an invisible hand, it grasped at Yu. With just a single strike, the strength of an early nascent soul was revealed. A powerful aura swept out, overwhelming the world. Yu punched out. There was a deep sound in the air, like the beating of a leather drum. He stood where he was, not moving at all. The cold stone coffin across from him emitted loud cracking sounds as it shattered into countless pieces. Bloodthirsty demon drew back, her voice shrill. Who are you? The demonic path was extremely powerful and there were countless spies within the Southern Empire and Northern Dynasty. Disregarding everything else, they had detailed records of all nascent soul realm powerhouses and above. With bloodthirsty demon status, she naturally had the qualifications to look through these records. But she had never seen this cultivator in front of her. This person's fist had been able to force her back. This meant that he had at least the strength of a middle nascent soul. Yu lightly said, "Don't waste time. The aura here has been blocked so no one will know. Now, I have several questions that I hope you can answer." Bloodthirsty demon covered her mouth and smiled. There is no need for you to appear so cold and callous. You just want to inquire about some information. I will tell you everything I know. Very good. Then, the first question is, where is Shan Wugu? Bloodthirsty demon's eyes flashed. Shan Wugu, oh, you mean that traitorous boy. He failed to live up to the Lord Demon Monarch's trust and was banished into the myriad demon caves. With his strength, he might still be alive. Where is the myriad demon caves? The demonic path high command. Bloodthirsty demon smiled. It is a place that the demon monarch guards all year round. I advise you not to have any random thoughts, otherwise I fear you will lose your life. She paused for a moment and then revealed a solemn expression. But, I can make a deal with fellow Daoist. As long as you agree to let me go, I will tell you a secret regarding how to enter and exit the myriad demon caves. Of course, the premise is that you want to rescue Shan Wugu. If you are his enemy, then there is no need to do anything. In the end, he will die. She winked. How about it? I am very sincere. I can swear a demonic path oath that I will not give you any false information. Yu hesitated. Across from him, bloodthirsty demon's eyes flashed with satisfaction. Of course she would give him true information. It was indeed possible to quietly enter and exit the myriad demon caves, but that was not only where the Saint Monarch guarded, but also where the Saint Monarch went into seclusion. Calculating the time, the Saint Monarch should be in the myriad demon caves right now. As long as this person entered, all that awaited him was death. Yu nodded. Very well. I agree to your conditions. Bloodthirsty demon smiled, and then, this smile froze on her face. She felt a sharp pain in her soul as if it were being cut by a saber. A blood-red light shined in front of her and she instantly approached. Bang! The head exploded and the headless corpse was sent flying away. It crashed into a stone wall and embedded itself into it. Blood flowed down the cracks. Yu took the storage ring and turned to leave. The giant courtyard outside the underground chamber was deathly silent. All the people of the demonic path had fallen to the ground with twisted expressions. With Qin Yu's powerful soul today, it would be simple for him to secretly clean them up. With a spirit stab, with a light twist, their souls would be shattered. So, when he said he would block off their aura, it was only to numb bloodthirsty demon. He found a place where treasures and spirit stones were stored. After plundering everything, he stepped forwards and quietly flew away like a bird. Bloodthirsty demon's words that Shan Wugu had been thrown into the myriad demon caves should be true. But, to believe that he could quietly enter and exit was far too naive. He feared that if he really did enter, what awaited him would be an absolute death trap. This matter concerned the Saint Furnace. If the demon monarch wanted to find it, the only clue he had was on Shan Wugu's body. When he imprisoned Shan Wugu, how could he not have made preparations? Bloodthirsty demon didn't know that Qin Yu knew about the Saint Furnace and had wanted to trick him into a trap. But instead, Qin Yu had relaxed his guard and killed him. Otherwise, no matter how tyrannical Qin Yu's strength was, wanting to kill bloodthirsty demon wouldn't have been easy. After careful analysis, Qin Yu came to a conclusion that his current strength wasn't enough to save Shan Wugu. In that moment, Qin Yu thought of his cheap senior apprentice brother Pill Crucible. He had enmity with the demonic path. If he handed over the Saint Furnace to him, he might be able to borrow the strength of Immortal Eclipse Valley to rescue Shan Wugu. But this was only a thought before Qin Yu pressed it down. This was no trifling matter. Once Immortal Eclipse Valley was dragged into this, a single mistake would result in a catastrophe. Countless people would die. Moreover, if this move angered the demon monarch, then Shan Wugu might even be killed. After all, with the demon monarch status, whether it was because of face or other considerations, it was normal for him to not accept any threats. Qin Yu clenched his fists and then loosened them. It seemed that he could only resolve this matter himself. Chapter 197. If he wanted to save Shan Wugu, increasing his strength was the only way. Then, there were two choices placed in front of Qin Yu. First, increase your cultivation with all your might. If his 5 elemental golden cores could make a breakthrough and reach the nascent soul realm, he would be able to put up a fight even against the demon monarch. The second was to forge the 5 elemental magic swords. The 5 elements sword diagram condensed the swords of the 5 elements, and its power was unparalleled. But only when combined with the real 5 element sword could its power be pushed to the extreme. The former was difficult and fundamental, while the latter was relatively simple and supplementary. There was nothing much to say. Let's just attack from both sides. He looked back at the bustling Homehold city. It was clear that what happened in the demonic path branch altar had already been discovered. Qin Yu gathered his thoughts. He took a step forward and howled away. 2 days later, Severed Spirit Mountain. As Qin Yu walked forwards, he could feel that the heaven and earth spiritual strength here was increasingly rich. This was related to the ancient cultivator's cave dwelling, but the radiant redwood planted in the valley should also be one of the reasons. After all, the radiant redwood itself had the ability to condense heaven and earth origin energy and form its own domain. Perhaps it wouldn't be too long before this Severed Spirit Mountain would attract a large number of cultivators because of the rich spiritual strength of the world. This is a small problem. Perhaps I should think of a way to eliminate the possibility of being disturbed in advance. Qin Yu thought for a moment. Then, he looked up at a mountain not too far away. His fingers formed a sword and a white sword light flashed. Rumble, the entire mountaintop was directly cut in half, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. With a flick of his sleeve, the mountaintop was wrapped up by an invisible force, and after a shattering sound, it turned into a huge steel that fell on the cut. Everything within a radius of 300 miles is forbidden. Anyone who dares to enter will die. Faint traces of sword intent flowed between his words. Although it wasn't much, it was enough to frighten the heart. Qin Yu's lips curved up in a smile. This should be enough. Severed Spirit Mountain was very large, and occupying the entire mountain would be too domineering. 150 kilometers was just right. A moment later, the mountain valley appeared in sight. After looking at it several times, Qin Yu frowned. The mountain valley's array formation was basically intact, but there were still some areas that had been damaged. His first thought was that the radiant redwood had been discovered. With a leap, he passed through the clouds and landed on the ground. He turned his head and saw that the radiant redwood was still intact. Qin Yu relaxed a little. But in the next moment, he couldn't help but frown. Hum, with the sound of vibrating wings, a swarm of yin-yang twin ants flew up from the radiant redwood. Their numbers had clearly increased. It was clear that they had reproduced many descendants during this time. This was nothing much, but this swarm of yin-yang ants actually showed hostility. Something was not right. Qin Yu's eyes sharpened. He looked at a clearly larger yin-yang twin ant in the swarm of ants. Its aura didn't seem right. Thinking for a moment, Qin Yu was startled to discover that this yin-yang twin ant's aura didn't seem right. It seemed to be in a similar situation to the Ant King. In other words, it was also subdued by someone and controlled the ant colony, leaving them here. It seemed that someone had indeed come here and discovered the existence of the radiant redwood. For some unknown reason, this person didn't touch the radiant redwood, but rather subdued the ant swarm to guard it. Qin Yu nearly laughed in anger. Not long ago, someone had said that he was not to his liking, and now, someone had actually reached her hand into his bosom. This was simply preposterous. It's always been yours truly who snatches other people's treasures. This was the first time he had experienced such a thing. Most of the yin-yang twin ants could still recognize the aura of the Ant King on Qin Yu's body. Thus, although they were a bit hostile, they hesitated. This clearly angered the new Ant King. It had already become the ruler of this swarm of yin-yang twin ants, so how could it allow the aura of another Ant King to affect its authority? With a sharp cry, the swarm of ants stirred, as if they would rush over at any moment. This caused Qin Yu's face to darken. He took out the Imperial Spirit Bag. With a thought, the Ant King and a large number of yin-yang twin ants flew out. He didn't need to worry about what happened next, they would clean up the mess on their own. Seeing the Ant King rush out with its subordinates, Qin Yu knew that this matter would soon be over. And as he thought, the yin-yang twin ant that had been subdued wasn't the Ant King's match at all. It was easily dismembered on the spot. But at this time, a circle of black light erupted from its corpse. It condensed into a skull that shot towards the Ant King and drilled into its body. Then, Qin Yu realized just what this black skull was. The Ant King's consciousness became chaotic, as if it wanted to escape his control. What a good cultivator, he actually had this sort of trump card. If Qin Yu weren't here, then even if the Ant King killed the traitor, it would likely still be enslaved. With a cold snort, Qin Yu lifted his hand and the Ant King fell into his palm. His powerful divine sense rushed into its body like a raging tide. In the next moment, his divine sense entered a blood-red world. The black skull cackled, "Since you have come to my purgatory, your only choice is death." Qin Yu's figure appeared. He glanced at it and then thrust his hand forwards. Within the blood-red world, there was a terrifying rumbling sound. Across from him, the black skull screeched, as if it never imagined that Qin Yu's soul would be so powerful. It turned to flee, but in the next moment it froze. With a miserable howl, it shattered into countless pieces and the blood-red world collapsed with it. Qin Yu opened his eyes. The Ant King in his palm was dispirited. It opened its eyes and pitifully said, alright, I know you were wronged. When I find this person in the future, I will definitely give you an explanation. The cultivator that tried to control the Ant King was extremely strong. He should be at the nascent soul realm. But, bloodthirsty demon Qin Yu could kill him if he wanted to without any fear. It was best if this person came knocking on his door. If he dared to touch his yin-yang twin ants, then he must be tired of living. At the same time, in a hidden cave dwelling far away, a brown-clothed old man fiercely opened his eyes. He spat out a mouthful of blood, his face filled with anger. Damn it, you destroyed my divine sense. Once I leave seclusion I will tear you to shreds. Qin Yu returned to the valley and began to cultivate. At the same time, he borrowed the little blue lamp to speed up the growth of the radiant red wood. As long as it began to condense radiant red fruits, increasing his cultivation would become simple. At the same time, he began to refine the 5-element swords. One of the reasons why the cultivator that tried to control the Ant King didn't touch the radiant red wood was because he didn't want to affect its growth. But the main reason was because of the one-eyed wild wolf. Its originally calf-sized body was now over 30 feet long. Its blue fur was as moist as silk and its aura was extraordinary. Its strength had reached the astonishing peak of the golden core realm. Moreover, Qin Yu could feel a terrifying slumbering aura from within its body. In a true life or death struggle, its strength could erupt with even greater strength. As for the other spirit pet, if this lustful, gluttonous, and incomparably flattering pheasant was worthy of being called a spirit pet, then it wasn't useful at all. According to the wild wolf, it had fled very quickly that day, disappearing without a trace with a whoosh. This caused Qin Yu to have a whole new level of respect for its fleeing methods. Of course, the Chicken King is not ashamed, in its own words. It said that the enemy was too powerful and if it stayed behind it would only drag them down. If it was captured as a hostage, that would be even worse. If the wild wolf couldn't defeat the enemy, it could endure the humiliation and wait for its master to return so that it could find the enemy. It had an arrogant expression that said, "How could you be so stupid and understand this overlord's good intentions?" Then, it was kicked far away by Qin Yu, telling it to hurry up and screw off. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to resist plucking out its fur and cooking it in a pot. Returning to the main topic. The radiant red wood was still in its growth period. According to its current speed, it might be able to condense radiant red fruits in 3 months. During this time, Qin Yu began to refine the 5-element magic swords. The magic swords refined from the Sky Thunder Bamboo were of the wood attribute. Then, there were 4 other types of magic swords that needed to be refined: metal, water, fire, and earth. The fire sword could be refined from the radiant red wood. The branch he cut off had absorbed the light of the little blue lamp for a long time and its quality was far higher than the main branch. The materials for the water attribute magic sword weren't a problem either. The deep-sea snake monster core that Soup Man had given Qin Yu at the sea race capital city was an excellent water attribute treasure. It was more than enough to refine. Then, the 5-element magic swords only lacked 2, metal and earth. Qin Yu rummaged through his storage ring and found an unexpected harvest. In the cave dwelling of the nascent soul cultivator, he had found that gray piece of iron. With Qin Yu's new cultivation, he discovered that there was something strange about this piece of iron. Without a doubt, it should be some sort of meteorite from beyond the heavens. It would be perfect to refine a metal attribute magic sword. A month later, Qin Yu opened his eyes. He lifted a hand and the 4 magic swords flew up, circling around him. They were respectively white, black, blue, and red. He was only missing an earth attribute magic sword to complete them. Once the 5-element magic swords were complete, Qin Yu would use his blood essence to refine them, turning them into nothingness and bringing them into his Dantian Sea where they could be nourished by the 5-element golden cores. This was the path of a life source magic weapon. Most sword cultivators were like this. Not only could they cultivate their life source magic weapons to a great extent, but they could also use their hands and fingers to communicate with each other. Of course, there were also disadvantages. Once a life source magic weapon was damaged, the cultivator himself would also have to bear the corresponding damage. It was best to refine a life source magic weapon at the same time so that there wouldn't be any gaps. Chinyu flicked his sleeves and placed the 4 magic swords back into his storage ring. The 5-element magic swords weren't spiritual objects of the 5 elements, so it wasn't difficult to find them. After thinking about it for a moment, Chinyu decided to temporarily put aside this matter and focus on raising the radiant red wood. After the radiant red fruits condensed, he would pick a batch and place it in his storage ring. Then, he would look for suitable earth attribute treasures so that his cultivation wouldn't be delayed as much. Now, he could use the remaining pills in his storage ring to temporarily cultivate. Although it was impossible to support the 5-element golden cores until they reached the nascent soul realm, for better or worse it should be able to last for a period of time. Time quietly passed. Chinyu began to cultivate once more. But one day, as night fell, it was like a star had fallen into the sea, thoroughly breaking apart this tranquility. The little blue lamp didn't shine. That's right, that was exactly what it meant. It was an incomparably accurate sensing of the heavens. The deep blue light that bloomed at the same time as the night didn't appear tonight. As Chinyu saw this, he froze in place. Then, his complexion paled and the back of his robes became soaked with a cold sweat. He never thought that the little blue lamp would lose its light. Now that he saw this with his own eyes, panic rose in his heart. Ever since the rise of the Eastern Mountain sect, Chinyu was well aware that he wasn't some genius nor did he have a powerful bloodline. The reason he was able to have today was because the little blue lamp was the root of everything. If there was a problem with it, then while he might still be an extremely powerful cultivator in the future, his road of cultivation would be completely severed. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.